Hey everyone! Welcome back to Eclipse Wizardry. Get ready for an amazing tale. What if Narcissa Malfoy kissed Harry at age 7 and ancient black family magic declared him the true Dark Lord? Smash that like button and subscribe for more. Here we go. Chapter 1. The Kiss. The Dursleys had a rule about Harry: he was not to be seen, not to be heard, and under absolutely no circumstances was he to embarrass them in public. Vernon had explained this rule 3 times on the drive to London, his thick fingers white-knuckled on the steering wheel, his eyes finding Harry in the rear-view mirror with the particular kind of loathing that doesn't need words. Petunia had twisted in her seat to add her own amendments: no wandering, no touching things, no speaking unless spoken to, and if anyone asked, he was the neighbor's boy they were doing a favor for, not theirs, not family, nothing like that. Harry had nodded at all of it. He was good at nodding. He was 7 years old and already an expert at making himself small. Diagon Alley was not a place Harry was supposed to know about. The Dursleys had driven to a pub called the Leaky Cauldron to collect a package for Mrs. Figg, something about a potion for her cats that she couldn't pick up herself, and Vernon had gone inside to find the barman while Petunia waited at the car with Dudley, who was demanding ice cream with the focused intensity of a child who had never once been told no. Harry had been left standing on the pavement outside. He'd been told to stay there. He had fully intended to stay there. But then the brick wall at the back of the pub had moved, and through the gap he'd caught a glimpse of something impossible: cobblestones and lanterns and shop windows full of things that had no business existing, and his feet had made a decision his brain didn't sign off on until he was already 3 steps inside. The alley was loud in the way that crowds are loud when everyone is doing something different. Owls called from stacked cages. A cart stacked with cauldrons rattled over the cobbles. 2 men in long robes argued over what appeared to be a compass that kept pointing in completely wrong directions. A woman at a sweet shop window was arranging piles of candy that moved. Harry stood in the middle of it and forgot to breathe. He'd always known there was something wrong with him. Strange things happened near him: a teacher's wig turning blue, a snake at the zoo he'd somehow spoken to like it understood, the time he'd ended up on the school roof when Dudley's gang was chasing him and could not, under any version of physics, explain how he'd gotten there. Petunia called it freakishness with a voice that made the word feel like a slap. Vernon called it ungrateful and unnatural and a number of other things, usually while his face was turning a particular shade of puce. But here everything was wrong in the same way he was wrong. Here the wrongness had shops and an economy and people who treated it like Tuesday. He turned in a slow circle, trying to look everywhere at once, and that was when he walked directly into Narcissa Malfoy. She was tall, even to adult eyes, and to Harry's she was staggering, all pale silver hair and fine-boned severity, wearing robes that probably cost more than the Dursleys' car. She had the kind of face that looked like it had been carved with precision rather than grown, cheekbones that could cut glass, eyes that were an almost colorless blue. She was carrying 2 bags and talking to another woman at her side, something about a robe fitting, when Harry's forehead connected squarely with her hip. Both bags hit the cobblestones. Harry stumbled back, already bracing for the shouting. I'm sorry, I didn't, careful." Her voice was cool and exact, the voice of someone who didn't raise it because she'd never needed to. She'd caught his shoulder reflexively to stop him falling, and for a half-second they were just that: a very tall woman and a very small boy, both slightly startled. Then she looked at him properly. Harry couldn't have explained afterward what he saw in her face in that moment. Her companion said something he didn't catch. Narcissa didn't respond. Her eyes had dropped to his forehead, to the place where the hair fell across it messily, where the scar lived underneath, and the color in her face did something complicated, a shift passing through her expression like weather. Recognition without a source. Like seeing something she'd been told about but never expected to find in a child's face. Her hand had not left his shoulder. "What is your name?" she asked. Harry had been told not to talk to strangers. He'd also been told the freakish things that happened around him were something to be ashamed of, and this place, this whole impossible place, suggested maybe some of the rules he'd been handed needed examining. Harry, he said. Harry, she repeated, and her voice had changed on the word, something careful moving through it. Who brought you to Diagon Alley today, Harry? My uncle. He's inside. Harry looked back at the entrance to the leaky cauldron, slightly visible through the archway. I wasn't supposed to come through. The wall moved, and, he gestured vaguely at the alley because what else could you do? The wall moved for you, she said. It wasn't a question. Is that unusual? The other woman, blonde as well, but softer, someone Harry would later know as a distant rosier cousin, was pulling at Narcissa's sleeve and saying something low and urgent. Narcissa ignored her with the absolute completeness of a woman who had spent a lifetime deciding what deserved her attention. She crouched down to his level. This alone struck Harry as remarkable because adults almost never did that. They spoke to the tops of children's heads as a general rule, especially his. Up close her eyes were extraordinary, not quite gray, not quite blue, the color of winter sky over water. And up close she could see the rest of what he'd been showing the world all summer, the slightly too large shirt, the bruise at his collarbone visible above the neckline, the wary look that 7-year-olds shouldn't have but some do, the ones who've been taught that kindness generally has conditions. Something in her face went very still. She was a Black, before she was a Malfoy. The Blacks had been aristocrats and purists and worse things, certainly, but they had also been keepers of the oldest magical traditions in Britain, traditions that predated Hogwarts, predated the International Statute, predated almost everything the modern wizarding world considered foundational. And one of those traditions lived in her hands and her instincts and the part of her that had been raised to recognize magic the way other people recognized breathing. She recognized it now. There was something enormous inside this child. Sleeping, maybe. Pressed down under years of ordinary misery into something very quiet and very dense, the way certain metals are heaviest when compressed smallest. But it was there, and it was old, and it was nothing like anything she had ever felt from a child before, including her own son. The Black family had a gesture. A rite, more accurately, old enough that its origins were contested even in their own library. Osculum agnitionis. The kiss of recognition. Performed by the women of the family in moments of true seeing, when you encountered a soul the magic deemed worthy or kin-touched or in some way bound to your line's fate. It had been generations since anyone had performed it sincerely rather than ceremonially. Narcissa Malfoy reached up, brushed the messy dark hair from Harry's forehead, and pressed her lips to his scar. She meant it as recognition. She meant it as a gift. What happened instead was that the world came apart. Not visibly, not immediately. To anyone watching, it would have looked like a woman going still, a child going still, and then a sound that was not quite sound traveling outward through the alley at shin height, moving through walls and people and cobblestones without caring about any of them. A frequency below hearing. The owls in their cages went silent. 3 different magical instruments in nearby shops gave readings that their owners would argue about for years. The wand in Narcissa's robe pocket cracked clean in 2. Harry felt it as heat first. Then something that wasn't heat but had no better word, a pressure that moved outward from the scar and inward simultaneously, tearing in 2 directions at once. For a single suspended second he saw something, not a vision exactly, but an impression, the way you see shapes behind your eyelids after looking at something bright. He saw a door. He saw it swinging open. He saw darkness on the other side of it that was not empty but full, so full it had weight, gravity, a pull that felt less like threat and more like recognition returned. He saw that the darkness knew his name. Had always known his name. Had been waiting with the patience of something that does not experience time the way living things do. Then Narcissa pulled back and made a sound he had never heard an adult make, something raw and involuntary, half gasp, half word, and her hand on his shoulder was shaking. Chissa. Her companion was gripping her arm. Chissa, what did you, the wards are, there are readings coming off him that are, I know. Narcissa's voice was not quite steady. She was looking at Harry and she was frightened, which was interesting, because he didn't feel frightening. He felt, actually, for the first time in his life, like himself. I know what I did. Harry looked down at his hands. They looked the same. He felt the same, mostly, except for the thing in his chest that was new, not a feeling, more like a compass settling, a needle swinging and locking onto north with a click he could feel in his sternum. Like something had been crooked his entire life and had been straightened without warning. What happened? He asked. Narcissa pulled herself upright. She was making an effort, he could see it, the deliberate assembly of composure over something that wanted to shake. Something I cannot undo, she said. And something I am not certain I should. The rosier cousin was already backing away from them both, looking between Harry and Narcissa with the wide eyes of someone recalculating several things at once. I need to go, she said. I was not here. I saw nothing. Narcissa, she dropped her voice to a hiss. Do you have any idea what the old texts say about what you just— Yes, Narcissa said simply. I read them too. The cousin left. Narcissa watched her go, then looked back at Harry, who was watching her with the steady, assessing patience of a child who has learned to read rooms very carefully. Sit with me, she said. For a moment. They found a bench outside Madame Malkin's. Narcissa sat with the rigid grace of someone whose spine had been taught to behave from birth. Harry sat beside her, feet not quite reaching the ground, and waited. Do you know what you are? She asked. A freak, Harry said, without heat or self-pity, the way you'd state that the sky is gray. Something moved through her face again, anger, he thought, on his behalf, which was unfamiliar enough that he didn't trust his reading. Who told you that? He shrugged. Lifted his chin toward the direction of the pub. They are wrong, she said, with a precision that made it final rather than comforting. Not you're fine, don't worry, but they are factually incorrect and I am telling you so. You are magical. Profoundly, extraordinarily magical. What you are, more specifically, she paused, looking at the scar on his forehead the way you look at something you expected to recognize in one context and have found in another entirely. That is more complicated. And I am not certain the books I need are currently on my shelf. What did you do to me? He asked. Still no accusation in it. Just the question. I gave you a kiss my family calls osculum agnitionis, she said. The kiss of recognition. It is meant to acknowledge someone the magic considers kin or significant. It is meant to be a formality. I have performed it perhaps a dozen times at family gatherings and felt almost nothing. She looked at her own hands briefly, both of them steady now by force of will alone. What I felt when I touched your scar was not nothing. It felt like a door opening, Harry said. She looked at him sharply. Yes. They sat with that for a moment. My name is Narcissa Malfoy, she said. I have a son about your age. His name is Draco. She hesitated, and he could see her making a decision in real time, sorting through implications and landing somewhere that surprised her. Are you treated well? In that house? Harry had been asked this before, by teachers, by Mrs. Figg, by the school nurse once. He'd always said yes because saying yes was the rule and because no one asking had actually wanted the complicated answer. He looked at Narcissa Malfoy and decided, for reasons he couldn't have articulated, that she was asking because she intended to do something about it. No, he said. She closed her eyes for a single second. When she opened them, something had been decided behind them. I am going to need to speak with your uncle. What followed was one of the stranger scenes Harry had ever witnessed, and his life had not been short on strange. Vernon Dursley emerged from the leaky cauldron clutching a small package and stopped dead at the sight of Harry sitting beside a woman who looked like she'd walked out of a very expensive portrait, and whose expression as she rose to face him was precisely the expression of someone who could ruin you and was actively considering it. The conversation was short. Vernon tried twice to go red and blustering, and both times Narcissa spoke one quiet, measured sentence, and he subsided like a balloon losing air. Harry caught fragments, arrangements, unsuitable circumstances, I think you understand what I mean, and mostly watched Vernon Dursley discover what happened when he aimed his particular brand of menace at someone who found it genuinely beneath contempt. In the end, Narcissa produced a small card from her robe, pressed it into Vernon's palm, and said, "You will receive an owl within the week. You will respond to it. We will not need to have this conversation a second time." She turned to Harry. "Come." "Come where?" Harry said. "I'm buying you lunch," she said. "And I am going to tell you a number of things your family should have told you years ago." She looked back at Vernon, who had the particular look of a man who just agreed to something and wasn't sure when. "That won't be a problem." It was not, in fact, a problem. They ate at a small restaurant above a bookshop on the alley, a place that Narcissa clearly visited enough to have a preferred table by the window. Harry ate more than he normally would have allowed himself in front of the Dursleys, because Narcissa ordered 3 times what 2 people needed and seemed specifically to want to watch him eat it. She did not comment on how fast he went through the bread. She told him about magic. Not the sanitized, beginner's version, not "you'll get your letter when you're 11, won't it be exciting," but the real architecture of it, the way it worked in the blood and the bone, the difference between innate magic and learned magic, why certain families carried more of one kind and less of another. She spoke to him like someone who expected to be understood, which was different from how most adults spoke to him, and he found himself understanding. She told him about the Black family, which was her family and had been for 40 years. She spoke of them with a complex mixture of pride and clear-eyed acknowledgement that they were also, in various ways, catastrophic, a family of immense magical heritage and several generations of decisions she didn't defend. She told him about the rite she'd performed and what the old texts said it could mean. "The texts say that the kiss of recognition, performed sincerely," she said, rolling her wine glass by the stem in the way she had of occupying her hands while she thought, and received by someone whose magic responds, creates a bond. A tie of acknowledgement between the one who recognizes and the one recognized. In the old days it was how the Black family claimed magical allegiances, not through force, but through sight. Seeing someone truly and having the magic confirm it. She paused. "The texts also say that if the recipient's magic is of sufficient weight, let's say, the rite can go further. Can unlock what the blood has sealed." "My scar," Harry said. "Your scar," she agreed, "is not just a scar. You know that, I think, on some level." He did. He'd always known there was something sitting inside the lightning bolt, something that breathed when the world was dark and very quiet. He'd thought it was nightmares. He'd thought it was whatever made him strange. He hadn't had the language for it, but he'd felt it the way you feel weather before it breaks. "What is it?" he asked. She was quiet for a moment. "The night your parents died," she said carefully, and he went very still, because no one spoke about his parents, not ever. The man responsible was performing a very specific kind of magic. A killing curse, which is, it's the worst there is, Harry, the worst thing magic can be turned to, death made into a weapon and aimed precisely. It has no counter-curse. It cannot be blocked. It has never once failed to kill in 14 centuries of recorded use. She looked at him over the rim of her glass. "Until you." Harry said nothing. "No one fully understands why it didn't kill you. There are theories, your mother's death, a kind of sacrificial protection woven into her last act. That is the most accepted explanation. But the curse struck you. It left a mark. And something of the caster, something of his power and his signature and his very particular relationship with death, transferred into that mark and has lived there since." She set the glass down. "Do you understand what I'm telling you?" "There's something of him in me," Harry said. "There was," she said. "The rite I performed, I didn't know it would do this. I want you to understand that, I was acting on instinct, but the rite touched that transferred power. The Black family magic recognized it, not as a corruption but as something legitimate that had gone to the wrong address. And she stopped. Started again. The old texts describe certain individuals as Vera Dominus Tenebrae, the true Lord of Darkness. It's a title predating Voldemort, predating the Dark Lords of the last several centuries entirely. It refers to someone whose relationship with the magic of death and darkness is not one of mastery or combat but of inheritance. Natural dominion. The way a river doesn't conquer water. Harry was 7. He was eating the last of a bowl of soup and looking out the window at the alley below, where people were going about the very ordinary business of being magical. A child in green robes was crying outside a pet shop. 2 elderly witches were arguing about a hat. "So," he said, "I'm the real one." Narcissa was quiet for a moment. "Then, the magic seems to think so. And the other one, Voldemort, is a man who very badly wanted to be something that you are simply born," she said, and there was something in her voice that was not quite contempt for Voldemort but was certainly not respect. "He broke himself into pieces trying to claim what you have by nature." Harry turned the soup spoon over in his hand. He was thinking, which he did a lot, quietly, in a way that unsettled adults because children weren't supposed to think in quite that register. He was thinking about the door he'd felt open in his chest. He was thinking about the darkness on the other side of it that had known his name. He was thinking about the fact that none of it frightened him and he wondered if it should. "What do you want from me?" he asked. She looked at him, really looked at him, the kind of looking that meant she'd heard the question inside the question, which was, "You did something that changed me, and now what do you want in return?" The Dursleys had trained him to expect transactions. "Nothing," she said. Then, because she was Narcissa and honesty was something she practiced precisely rather than lavishly, "That isn't entirely true. I want to know what I've done. I want to ensure you're not, I want to know you're all right." She paused. "I want to know you're being educated properly, which clearly you are not. And I want," she stopped herself. "What?" "I want," she said, very carefully, "to not have left you on a pavement in Diagon Alley and walked away, having done what I did." Harry looked at her for a long moment. He had the eyes, people would comment later, of someone who could see things you'd rather they couldn't. At 7, those eyes were simply watchful and not yet fully developed in their particular unnerving quality. But even at 7, Narcissa felt seen. "Okay," he said. The owl came to the Dursleys 3 days later. Vernon's face went through 4 distinct colors reading the letter, and then he handed it to Petunia, who went white. The letter from Narcissa Malfoy was polite in the way that a blade is polite before it separates something from something else. It outlined, in careful and legal language, several things. A tutoring arrangement. A schedule for Harry's time, weekends, initially, then expanding. The name of a magical solicitor. A separate, shorter paragraph that merely referenced the existence of a certain institution called the Department of Magical Child Welfare, and what kinds of reports wizarding families were legally required to make about Muggle-raised magical children. She never made the threat explicitly. She didn't need to. Harry packed a small bag every Saturday morning for the next 4 years. The first time he arrived at Malfoy Manor, Draco met him at the gate with the specific expression of a child who has been told he must be polite about something and is already composing his opinion otherwise. He was a year younger than Harry, 6 to Harry's 7, blonde as his mother but with his father's sharper angles, already carrying himself with a kind of self-importance that had been carefully installed rather than organically grown. He looked Harry up and down. "You're the one who broke Mother's wand," he said. "I didn't break it," Harry said. "She kissed my scar and it broke." Draco appeared to consider this. "That's worse," he decided. "That means you broke it." This was, Harry thought, a fairly reasonable point. "I didn't do it on purpose. Mother only ever broke one wand before. She threw it at Father's head in 1984 and it hit the fireplace mantel." Draco seemed oddly proud of this. You'd have to be more impressive than a fireplace mantle. Am I? Draco looked at him again, the same assessing look his mother had, though still developing in him, more childlike and less precise. I don't know yet, he said honestly. Come on, then. Mother said you're to have the blue guest room. The blue guest room was larger than the entire ground floor of Privet Drive. Harry sat on the edge of the bed after Draco had shown him around with the tour guide efficiency of a child who liked being the one who knew things, and he looked around at the carved wood and the tapestried walls and the window that looked out over gardens that seemed to go on forever, and felt the door in his chest humming quietly, contentedly, like something that had found the temperature it was meant to live in. He thought, this is not where I come from. And then, but this is where I begin. The tutors Narcissa arranged were not the kind who used textbooks. The first was a woman named Alditha Price who had studied blood magic theory at a university in Prague that no longer officially existed, and whose first lesson involved Harry placing his hand flat on a piece of parchment and watching what happened. What happened was that the parchment turned black from the edges in and then burned without heat, leaving behind a silhouette of his hand in scorched dark lines that moved faintly. Alditha looked at it for a very long time. Well, she said. Is that bad? Harry asked. No, she said. It's extraordinary. She looked at him. Have you done wandless magic before? I don't know what that means. Magic without a wand. Before training. Involuntary. He listed the roof incident. The snake. The teacher's wig. She was already writing notes. All raw manifestations. All in extremis. She looked up. With training, and with the particular, let's call it the particular frequency of your magic, you won't need extremis. What will I need? She smiled for the first time. Intent, she said. Just intent. The second tutor was an older man named Caius Selwyn, who taught history, not the sanitized ministry-approved version, but the actual history, the kind that had teeth in it. He taught Harry about the true Dark Lords of antiquity, not as villains in a children's story but as figures of genuine magical philosophy, people who understood that the divide between light and dark magic was a relatively recent political invention and that the oldest, deepest magic didn't care about the divide at all. Magic is like weather, Selwyn said once, sitting in the Manor's library with a cup of tea going cold beside him. Storm and sunshine are not enemies. They're the same system. Anyone who tells you otherwise is selling something. Harry wrote it down. He wrote almost everything down. The third tutor never gave a name. He came every third Saturday and was very old, old enough that his face had moved past wrinkled into something almost geological, and he taught Harry Latin. Not conversational Latin. Incantational Latin, the kind that understood what the words were for, the mechanism behind the magic language rather than just the sounds. By the time Harry was 9, he could perform 12 distinct spells wandlessly, had read the Selwyn family's annotated history of Dark Lord succession 3 times, and could read a magical contract in Latin and identify its binding clauses. By the time he was 10, he had accidentally operated from the Manor's east garden to its west wing while trying to get away from Draco, who had been throwing acorns at him. They'd both stood and stared at each other for a moment, and then Draco had said, "You cheated," with a mixture of admiration and outrage that had become the texture of their relationship. Narcissa had found them in the west wing and not said anything for a long moment. Then, "I'm adding a tutor for theoretical apparition theory. You're not to do that again without supervision." "I didn't exactly do it on purpose," Harry said. "No," she agreed, "but you could have splinched yourself," and, she stopped. "I would prefer you intact." It was the closest she ever came, in those early years, to saying something she didn't say. Harry heard it anyway. Lucius Malfoy was a problem, but a manageable one. He had a kind of genial contempt for most things that wasn't personal until it was, and for the first year he regarded Harry with the cool assessment of a man cataloging an asset of unknown value. He did not treat Harry badly. He also didn't treat him warmly. He was the kind of man who reserved warmth for things that had proven their usefulness, and Harry had not yet done that by any calculus Lucius recognized. That changed the winter Harry was 9, when Lucius tested him. He called it a discussion, sat Harry down in the study with its enormous leather chairs and asked him questions about magical theory and politics and what Harry knew of the Dark Lord's history. It was framed conversationally, but Harry had been reading magical contracts for a year and he recognized the structure of an evaluation. He answered honestly and completely, including the parts that he knew Lucius would find uncomfortable, his opinion that the Death Eater's philosophy was intellectually incoherent because it confused bloodline with magical strength, two related but distinct things, and that Voldemort's approach to immortality was particularly self-defeating given that it involved fragmenting the very thing he was trying to preserve. Lucius had been very quiet for a moment. "You are 9 years old," he said. "Yes. And you think Voldemort's philosophy is intellectually incoherent?" "I think his execution was," Harry said. The philosophical tradition he was drawing from is much older and more interesting than what he did with it. He narrowed it. He was afraid of death and decided to fight it rather than understand it, and most of his followers were people who were afraid of other things and needed someone to point the fear toward. He paused. "That's not power. That's just terror with a leadership structure." Lucius looked at him with an expression Harry couldn't entirely classify, not admiration exactly, not unease exactly, something that had elements of both. "And what are you?" he asked. "If he is that." Harry thought about the door in his chest. He thought about what Narcissa had told him, a river doesn't conquer water. He thought about Caius Selwyn's histories, about the old texts, about what it meant to be named something by magic rather than ambition. "I'm the thing that doesn't need to be afraid," he said. After that, Lucius treated him differently. Not warmly. But with a wariness that was, in its own way, a form of respect. He began including Harry in conversations he normally had only with adults. He introduced him to certain people at certain gatherings with a neutrality that meant, watch this child and make note. The wizarding world did not yet know about Harry. Not about the scar and what had really been done to it, not about the title the old magic had laid on him. Narcissa had been careful about that with the precision of someone who understood that the wrong kind of attention at the wrong age could be used as a weapon against him. She had woven a careful web of low-key information. Narcissa Malfoy is informally tutoring the Potter boy. She has an interest in the case, given his parents and his heritage. Nothing alarming. Nothing that brought Dumbledore's attention sharply enough to act. But things have a way of leaking. In the spring before Harry's 11th birthday, Narcissa found him in the Manor's library reading the original Black Family Grimoire, the genuine article, the one kept under a preservation charm that she'd thought was adequately hidden, the one with the chapter on the Vera Dominus Tenebrae that she'd marked with a pale blue ribbon 4 years ago. She stood in the doorway for a moment. He looked up from the book. The mark on his forehead was doing something, faint, barely visible, but present, a deep charcoal quality to the air around the scar like heat haze but darker. He'd been doing it more lately. Reading old magic seemed to wake it. "How long have you known where that was?" she asked. "About a year," he said. "I waited until I thought I was ready to understand it properly." She crossed the room and sat across from him. "And are you?" He considered the question with the seriousness she'd learned to expect from him. "Most of it. There are sections in the back where the Latin goes into a dialect I don't recognize. Possibly Old Welsh." He paused. "The section you marked is interesting." It says the true Dark Lord doesn't conquer the forces of death," Harry said. "It says he governs them. The way a king governs, not by doing everything himself but by being what all the pieces acknowledge." He closed the book. "It also says that when the seal is fully woken, the sovereign will be recognized by 3 things, by the dead, by the dark creatures, and by the magic in the land itself." He looked at her. "Have things been happening in the grounds? Since I started coming here?" She held his gaze steadily. "Yes. What kind? The Thestrals at the edge of the forest, she said. They moved their herd 3 years ago. To the part of the grounds nearest the house. The house elves say, she stopped. What do the house elves say? That the manor recognizes you, she said. That the wards acknowledge you second, after Lucius. Which is something that has never happened with a guest in this house before. Harry was quiet. Outside the library windows, the grounds were going gold in evening light. Somewhere out there, a herd of Thestrals that could only be seen by those who'd witnessed death were standing nearest to where he slept. He thought, they can see death and they came to me. He thought, of course they did. He closed the grimoire gently and set it on the table between them. Dumbledore's going to find out eventually, he said. Yes. What will he do? Narcissa's expression did something complicated. She'd had 4 years to think about Dumbledore and what she knew of him, the man who had placed an infant in a Muggle household without proper investigation, who had built an entire strategy around a prophecy he kept to himself, who was, by any measure, the most powerful political force in the wizarding world and one who was entirely convinced of the righteousness of his own design. He'll want to bring you into his plans, she said. He'll want to manage you. To position you as a weapon aimed at Voldemort. And if I don't want to be aimed? She met his eyes, those steady, old eyes in a young face. Then you tell him no, she said, simply. Harry looked at her and then he smiled. It was a rare expression on him, not because he was unhappy, but because his face, generally, was built for something more precise than open warmth. When he smiled it changed the whole arrangement of his features, made him look, for a second, simply like a boy. Okay, he said. He won't like it, she warned. Good, Harry said. I'm tired of being someone's plan. He picked up the grimoire again and found his page. Outside, the evening moved over the manor's grounds in long golden sheets. In the east field, the Thestrals turned their blind-looking eyes toward the lit library window, and stood still, and waited, the way creatures who have made their choice always wait, without urgency, without doubt, simply present, simply certain, the way the dark is always certain when you stop being afraid to look at it. Inside, Harry read. Somewhere in the north of England, in a school that sat behind every ward and enchantment Dumbledore had spent 40 years perfecting, a sorting hat that had not moved from its shelf in 3 months suddenly shifted, and said, very quietly, to no one in particular, something is coming. Chapter 2, The Seal. The Hogwarts letter arrived on a Tuesday. Harry knew it was coming, had known for weeks, the way he'd learned to know things that had no ordinary explanation, a low hum in the back of his awareness like a signal finding its receiver. The post owl landed on the manor's breakfast table with the self-important certainty of ministry correspondence and dropped 2 letters, one in front of Draco, one in front of Harry. Draco grabbed his immediately and tore it open with both hands, nearly upsetting his juice. Harry picked his up and turned it over. Mr. H. Potter, the Blue Guest Room, Malfoy Manor, Wiltshire. The handwriting was the same careful, impersonal script as every Hogwarts letter ever sent, but the address had adapted, which meant the school's enchantment had found him here rather than at Privet Drive, which meant something in the school's magic had made a determination about where he actually lived. He set it down beside his plate and finished his toast. Draco stopped reading his own letter to stare. Aren't you going to open it? In a moment. It's your Hogwarts letter. I know what it is. Harry. Draco said his name the way he said most things, with the specific exasperation of someone who found other people's calm unreasonable. Open the letter. Harry opened the letter. It was standard. 11 lines of parchment informing him that he had a place at Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry beginning September 1st, listing required equipment, pointing him toward Diagon Alley for supplies, signed by Minerva McGonagall. Unremarkable in every particular. And yet Harry read it twice, because there was something in the texture of the parchment itself, a faint warmth, like holding your hand near a fire, a resonance that moved through the paper and into his fingers, that told him the letter was not simply a letter but a recognition, the school acknowledging him the way the manners wards already did. He set it down. "Well?" Draco said. "September 1st, Harry said. "Obviously September 1st, it's always September 1st. Draco was already back to reading his own, cataloguing the supply list with the focused pleasure of a child whose favorite activity was acquiring things. "Mother said we'd go to Diagon Alley next week. She's already ordered half our books through a contact in Flourish and Blots." He glanced up. "She also said Madame Malkins for robes, which means 3 hours of standing while someone measures your arms." "She mentioned it," Harry said. Narcissa came in as they were finishing breakfast, dressed for going out, her expression doing the particular calibrated thing it did when she was managing several concerns simultaneously. She looked at both letters on the table, and then at Harry, and something passed through her face, something she assembled quickly into neutrality, but not before he'd seen it. Relief. Not that the letter had come, but that it had come here. "Good," she said, and sat down with her tea. The owl from Dumbledore arrived that afternoon. Harry was in the East Garden when it came, a large tawny owl that found him with the directional certainty of something that had been given very specific instructions, and dropped a letter in his lap with the weight of something formally significant. He looked at the seal on the back, a crest involving a phoenix. He broke it and read. "Dear Mr. Potter, I hope this letter finds you well. You may not be aware of who I am. My name is Albus Dumbledore, and I serve as headmaster of Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, where I understand you will be joining us this September. I am very much looking forward to meeting you properly. I wonder if I might have a brief word before the school year begins. I find it useful to speak with students individually before their arrival, particularly those with, shall we say, particular circumstances in their backgrounds. There are things I believe you would benefit from knowing, and things I think we might discuss together. If you are agreeable, I would suggest a meeting at Hogwarts at your earliest convenience. Warmest regards, Albus Dumbledore, Order of Merlin, First Class." Harry read it twice. Then he folded it and held it for a moment, thinking. The letter was careful. Polite. The tone was paternal, professionally warm. "I find it useful to speak with students individually," which was almost certainly not true in general but was being presented as a universal habit to avoid saying "I specifically want to speak with you." The phrase "particular circumstances in their backgrounds" was doing a great deal of heavy lifting. "And things I believe you would benefit from knowing" was the language of someone who intended to control the supply of information. He thought about what Narcissa had said, "He'll want to manage you." He took the letter inside and gave it to her without comment. She read it standing in the hallway, one hand holding her gloves, and her expression went through 3 phases: recognition, wariness, and then the cool, strategic stillness that meant she was thinking in full. "He knows," she said. "Not everything. But he's been watching." "Probably for years," Harry agreed. "He placed me with the Dursleys. He'll have had some kind of monitoring. He doesn't know the extent of it." She folded the letter along its original crease. "If he did, this letter would be more direct." "He thinks I'm manageable," Harry said. "Yes. What does he actually know about the seal?" Narcissa moved past him into the sitting room and Harry followed. She sat, crossed her ankles, held the letter against her knee. The seal's existence is recorded in several texts he would certainly have read. Whether he connects what the old magic did in the alley 4 years ago with those texts, she paused. "He'll know something happened. Our Rosier cousin talked." "I knew she would. But there are many things that can happen when black family magic is performed unexpectedly. He may have filed it as a ward malfunction or a blood magic anomaly. But he's not sure," Harry said, "so he wants to meet. He wants to evaluate," she corrected. "To see what he's dealing with." Harry sat in the armchair opposite her. Outside, the grounds were summer-heavy, the hedges thick and green, the fountain in the central courtyard sending up a lazy arc of water in the heat. A peacock, one of Lucius's absurd white peacocks, was crossing the far end of the lawn with enormous self-importance. "Write him back," Harry said. Narcissa looked at him. "Tell him I'll meet him," he said. "At the Leaky Cauldron, not Hogwarts. Public, on my terms, not his. And tell him I'll be bringing you." A very slight curve of her mouth. "He won't like the conditions." "He'll accept them," Harry said. "He wants to see me badly enough." He was right. The response came the next morning, still warm, still carefully paternal, now slightly more measured in tone, accepting the terms with a kind of gracious flexibility that managed to imply the conditions didn't matter while taking every single one of them. The meeting was set for Friday. Draco found out that evening and spent approximately 10 minutes explaining why he should be allowed to come, on grounds ranging from "I've known you longer" to "I'm very mature for my age" to "Mother, tell him to tell me why not." Harry listened to all of it while cleaning his reading glasses, a habit he'd picked up from Selwyn, reading in low light for years, and said, when Draco finally ran down, "Because Dumbledore wants to see what I am. If you're there, the conversation becomes about the Malfoy family. This one needs to be about me." Draco opened his mouth. "I'll tell you everything afterward," Harry said. Draco closed his mouth. This had become one of their arrangements. Harry told him everything afterward, and Draco's information was reliable and comprehensive in return. It worked because they'd both learned early that the other didn't lie, even when the truth was inconvenient. "Fine," Draco said. "But if he tries to, I don't know, put you under some kind of obligation charm." "He won't," Harry said. "How do you know?" Harry looked up from his glasses. "Because I'll feel it before he finishes the incantation," he said. "And then we'll have a different kind of conversation." Draco stared at him. Then he shook his head and went back to his book with the air of someone filing a piece of information under reasons not to annoy Harry. The Leaky Cauldron on a Friday morning in July was half empty, a few older witches over tea, a pair of wizards arguing about Quidditch near the bar, Tom the barman polishing glasses with the steady patience of someone who had been doing it for 40 years and expected to be doing it for 40 more. It smelled like butterbeer and old wood and the particular underlayer of magic that accumulated in places where magical people had gathered for centuries. Harry arrived with Narcissa 12 minutes before the agreed time, because she considered arriving exactly on time a statement of parity rather than respect, and arriving late an insult, and arriving early a form of tactical advantage. They took a table at the back where the sight lines were good and ordered tea they didn't particularly want. Dumbledore arrived precisely at the agreed minute. Harry had read about him. Had read quite a lot about him, as it happened. Selwyn had covered him in the modern history sections, and the Black Library had its own perspectives, and Harry had assembled a fairly complete picture. He was prepared for the half-moon spectacles and the long robes and the silver beard and the particular radiant quality that extremely powerful people sometimes had, the sense that the air around them was doing something more interesting than usual. He was not quite prepared for the eyes. Dumbledore's eyes were described in everything as twinkling, bright, warm, the eyes of a grandfather, the eyes of a man in whom you could not help but trust. What they were, in person, was sharp. Sharp and very, very old, and moving with the rapid assessment of someone who catalogued everything they looked at. The warmth was real, Harry thought, but it was the warmth of a man who had learned to project it, not just feel it. There was a difference. Those eyes swept the table, took in Narcissa with an unreadable flicker, and settled on Harry. Harry looked back. For a moment neither of them said anything, and the air between them had the quality of two people simultaneously taking the other's measure and each knowing the other was doing it. Then Dumbledore smiled, the full version, the one that activated the eyes. "Harry," he said, and sat down opposite them, and his voice had the resonant warmth of someone who had practiced being impressive until it was completely natural. "My goodness. You look extraordinarily like your father." "I've been told," Harry said. "You look exactly like your portraits." A very brief pause. Then the smile adjusted, recalibrated, something behind it sharpening with what might have been appreciation. "Indeed. They are perhaps too flattering. He looked at Narcissa. Narcissa. It has been some time. Albus, she said, with the pleasantness of a closed door. He ordered tea from Tom with the comfort of a man who'd been ordering tea in this room for longer than most people had been alive, and then settled back and looked at Harry again with the particular quality of someone deciding where to begin. I imagine, he said, that you have many questions. Several, Harry said. Though I suspect you've come with your own agenda, and I'm curious to hear it first. Another recalibration. Faster this time, the smile thinning slightly, something more genuine and more careful coming through underneath it. He'd expected, Harry thought, to be talking to a child. He'd expected curiosity and eagerness and the particular openness of someone who'd been kept from information and was hungry for it. He was adjusting. Very well, Dumbledore said. I'll be direct, then. He leaned forward slightly, elbows on the table, hands folded. You are famous, Harry. I suspect you know this. You are famous in our world for something that happened when you were a year old, something remarkable and terrible and significant in ways that are still unfolding. The man responsible, the one who, Voldemort, Harry said. A ripple went through the room. The two men at the bar both looked over. Tom's polishing slowed. Dumbledore did not flinch. His eyes did something, registered, assessed, filed. Yes, he said. Voldemort. He is not gone. Weakened, diminished, but not destroyed. And there is a prophecy, Harry, that suggests, I know about the prophecy, Harry said. The room had settled back to its ordinary sounds. Dumbledore was very still. Do you? The one with the power to vanquish the Dark Lord approaches, born to those who have thrice defied him, born as the seventh month dies, and the Dark Lord will mark him as his equal, but he will have power the Dark Lord knows not, and either must die at the hand of the other, for neither can live while the other survives. Harry said it cleanly, from memory, watching Dumbledore's face the whole time. The Hall of Prophecy version, Department of Mysteries, filed under Sybil Trelawney, 1980. Your presence at the interview is documented in the Ministry's witness records, which are semi-public if you know where to look. Dumbledore was quiet for a long moment. Then he set down his tea with a care that suggested he needed a moment to think and was using the gesture to buy it. You are remarkably well informed. I've had good tutors, Harry said. Caius Selwyn, Dumbledore said. And Alditha Price. I am aware of them. He looked at Narcissa briefly. You've been thorough, Narcissa. He deserved to be prepared, she said. He deserved many things, Dumbledore agreed, and for a moment his voice carried something genuine and heavy, a weight of guilt that was real rather than performed. He deserved better than what I arranged for him at age 1, and for that I owe him a debt that I am not certain I know how to repay. Harry looked at him. The guilt was real, he could feel that, the way he could feel most things in people if he paid attention. Dumbledore actually believed this. Which made him complicated, and complicated was always more difficult than simply wrong. Then tell me what you actually want, Harry said. Not what you think I need to hear. What you want. Dumbledore looked at him for a long time. Then he sighed, not performatively, genuinely, the sound of a very old man setting something down. I want you to understand what you are, he said. What the scar means. What Voldemort's return, when it comes, will require of you. I have spent 30 years trying to build a defense against what's coming, and you are, in my understanding, the linchpin of it. Not a weapon, he added quickly, and Harry thought, he practiced that sentence. A person. But one whose choices will determine the shape of what comes after. You want me in your plan, Harry said. I want you to survive, Dumbledore said, and now his voice was simply old and tired and sincere. I have lost too many people to poor planning and secrecy and my own mistakes. I am trying to do better. Harry was quiet. He looked at his tea. He looked at the table. He looked at Dumbledore's face, which was very old and very tired and very sure, in the way that people who have been sure about something for decades are sure, not arrogantly, but structurally, the sureness built into the foundations of how they think. He thought, this man loves me. In the particular way that people love useful things. He thought, he also believes in me. In his version of me. He thought, those are very different things. I appreciate the honesty, Harry said. So I'll return it. He folded his hands on the table, and the scar on his forehead did its faint heat thing, the dark shimmer, the charcoal quality in the air, and he watched Dumbledore's eyes go to it and register. I know what I am. Not the version in the prophecy, I know what I actually am, what the magic says about me, what the old texts say. I'm not going to be a weapon and I'm not going to be a plan and I'm not going to be your linchpin. He paused. I'm going to go to Hogwarts and I'm going to learn what I need to learn and I'm going to deal with Voldemort when the time comes. But I'm going to do it my way. Not because I'm foolish or because I don't respect what you've built, I do. But because what I am doesn't answer to plans. It answers to itself. Dumbledore had gone very still. He was looking at Harry's scar, or rather, at the air around Harry's scar, with the expression of a man who has found something he knew existed but is startled to find it looking back at him. The seal, he said. Very quietly. Yes, Harry said. The silence lasted several seconds. Narcissa, Dumbledore said, without looking away from Harry, what, precisely, did you do in Diagon Alley 4 years ago? What the magic required, she said. He finally looked at her. Something moved through his face, not anger exactly, not accusation exactly. Do you understand what you've woken? Better than you do, she said pleasantly. Dumbledore looked back at Harry. And something happened in his face that Harry had not expected and would think about for a long time afterward. The strategy fell away for a moment, and underneath it was something purely human, an old man looking at a child and experiencing something close to awe, which was not the same as approval, but was real. You know, he said slowly, I have spent 40 years believing I could see all the variables. Every piece on the board. He took off his spectacles and turned them over in his hands. You are, Harry Potter, a piece that I cannot see the edges of. That's all right, Harry said. I'm not trying to frighten you. No, Dumbledore said. I suspect you don't need to try. They left it there, not warmly, not coldly. An understanding without an agreement. Dumbledore walked them to the door of the pub with the impeccable courtesy of a man who was still thinking hard, and at the door he stopped and said to Harry, one thing. A question, if you'll permit it. Go ahead. The prophecy says that neither can live while the other survives. Do you believe it applies to you? Harry looked at him. No, he said. I think the prophecy was about a version of me that never existed. The one you were building toward. He buttoned his jacket. Voldemort marked me as his equal. But he was wrong about what he was looking at. He walked out into the summer street, and behind him Narcissa and Dumbledore exchanged one brief, loaded glance. Then she followed Harry, and the door of the leaky cauldron swung shut behind her. Well, she said, drawing up alongside him. He'll keep watching, Harry said. Of course. He's not going to interfere. Not directly. Not yet. He's reassessing, she agreed. He thought he knew what he was dealing with. She glanced at him sidelong. You were more direct than I expected. You said tell him no, Harry said. I told him no and explained why. That seemed more respectful than being evasive. She was quiet for a moment. Then, unexpectedly, your mother would have liked you. Harry kept walking, but something in his chest did a thing it didn't usually do. Quiet. Warm. Gone quickly, the way things you're not expecting pass before you can look at them directly. Tell me about her sometime, he said. I will, Narcissa said. Diagon Alley for school supplies should have been straightforward and was not, because Harry had the specific quality, fully developed by age 11, of being looked at. Not in the way that famous people are looked at. He didn't look like his mother, and outside of the scar, which his hair mostly covered, there was nothing overtly distinctive about him. The looking was something else, something that had developed gradually over the years at the manor, a peripheral awareness in other magical people that something was present, the way animals sense weather. It got worse the further into the alley they went. Madame Malkin's first. Draco arrived late, having been held up by an argument with Lucius about something Harry had tuned out during breakfast, and was still wearing the expression of that argument when he stepped up onto the fitting platform beside Harry and the woman began measuring. A boy with red hair and freckles was at the other end of the shop, standing on his own platform with the specific expression of someone who has been measured for robes many times and has not yet found the experience interesting. He glanced over at Harry and Draco with the automatic wariness of someone who has learned to assess quickly, clocked Draco's robes and the expression, and looked away. Harry watched him for a moment. There was something straightforward about him, a kind of uncomplicated energy that was different from most of the people Harry spent time with. Not simple, exactly. Just without layers of performance. Ron Weasley, Draco said, under his breath, the way you say the name of something you've been briefed on. He didn't say it particularly nastily, but the tone had the structure of a categorization that had been preloaded. You've met? Harry asked. Everyone knows the Weasleys, Draco said, which was not an answer. Harry looked at Ron Weasley standing at the end of the shop, being measured in robes that had been let out and rehemmed several times, and thought, he'll be sorted into Gryffindor and he'll be good at chess and he'll be loyal past the point of convenience. He didn't know why he knew this. He did know it. Don't be rude to him, Harry said. Draco looked at him. I wasn't going to be. You were considering it. Draco lowered his voice. I was not considering it, I was simply noting who he was. Harry said, which conveyed nothing and everything. Flourish and Blots was packed with incoming first years and their families, and Harry moved through it quickly, list in hand, collecting the required texts with the efficiency of someone who'd been doing his own research for 4 years and mostly wanted to get to the non-required section. Narcissa had given him a secondary list, her own list, handwritten, based on what she'd assembled from the manor's library and Selwyn's recommendations, and he found 3 of the 7 in the back of the shop behind a display that most people seemed to walk past. He was reaching for the 4th when someone reached for it at the same time. He looked up. A girl with an extraordinary quantity of hair and the focused expression of someone on a mission. Brown eyes very bright, already sized him up and was clearly doing the arithmetic of should I argue for this book or concede. She was holding 2 other books under one arm and had a list that was considerably longer than the required one. I had it first, she said, then seemed to reconsider the aggression of this. I saw it first, anyway. You can have it, Harry said. He'd already read that one. She looked slightly wrong-footed by the lack of argument. Oh. She took it. Thank you. She looked at the books under his arm. Principles of Ancient Incantation and Blood Theory, a Modern Survey? She squinted. Those aren't on the first-year list. No, Harry agreed. They're 5th-year reading at least. The survey is mostly used in NEWT preparation. I know, Harry said. She looked at him with the expression of someone recalibrating quickly. Are you first year? Yes. So am I. She shifted the books under her arm. Hermione Granger. Harry Potter. The reaction in her face was interesting. She knew the name, clearly, had read about him, the specific quality of recognition when a name maps onto something pre-existing in your mental catalog. But she didn't squeal or stare at his forehead, just looked at him with something sharper. So this is what that looks like. You've read ahead, she said. Somewhat, Harry said. How much ahead? Depends on the subject. She considered this. Defense against the dark arts? Covered most of the practical curriculum through 3rd year, Harry said. The theoretical framework I'm better on. Charms? Good. Transfiguration? Working on it. The underlying mathematics are interesting. They really are, she said immediately, with the enthusiasm of someone who has been waiting to have this conversation. The dimensional substitution in switching spells is, most people don't even realize there are equations involved, they just, she stopped herself. Sorry. I talk about things like that too much. No, Harry said. Tell me about the dimensional substitution. She told him about the dimensional substitution. They stood in the back of Flourish and Blots for 20 minutes while the shop moved around them, and she talked with the precision and speed of someone whose brain was always slightly ahead of her words, and Harry listened and asked questions that told her he was actually following, and by the end of it she was looking at him with a kind of cautious warmth that was different from how she'd looked at him at the start. Draco appeared at the end of the aisle. Harry. Mother's been looking for, he stopped. Looked at Hermione. Who's this? Hermione Granger, Harry said. She explained dimensional substitution in switching spells better than Selwyn did. Draco's eyes went to her robes, the muggle clothes underneath, the slightly non-wizarding hairpin, did the fast assessment that was second nature to him and started forming the beginning of a sentence that Harry could see was going to go badly. Draco, Harry said, pleasantly. Draco looked at him. Don't, Harry said. A pause. Then Draco looked at Hermione again, this time with the particular expression of someone editing themselves in real time. Is the dimensional substitution thing actually useful? He asked, which was Draco's version of an olive branch, not warmth, but a question that treated you as worth asking. Extremely, Hermione said, slightly warily. Tell me at some point, Draco said. I've never understood switching spells. He looked at Harry. Mother's at the front. We need to go. Harry nodded, looked at Hermione. Hogwarts, he said. Hogwarts, she agreed. We'll see. She said it like a challenge. He received it like an invitation. Ollivander's was last, because Harry had been dreading it in the particular way you dread something significant that you cannot predict. Draco had gone first, his wand had cooperated after the 5th try, Hawthorn and Unicorn Hair, 10 inches, a reactive wand for a reactive personality, and Draco had looked at it with the satisfaction of something confirmed. Harry stepped up to the counter. Ollivander looked at him. Ollivander was old in the way that very few people were old, not just aged but accumulated, every year visible as a layer, his eyes pale and filmed silver and seeing things other people's eyes didn't track. He had the quality Harry associated with people whose relationship with magic had been very long and very close, a kind of permanent slight distraction, as if part of them was always listening to something no one else could hear. He looked at Harry. His eyes went to the forehead. He said nothing. I need a wand, Harry said. Yes, Ollivander said. You do. He didn't move for a moment. I have been wondering, he said softly, since July of 1981, what this day would look like. He turned to his shelves and began pulling boxes. Holly and Phoenix Feather, 11 inches, I think. The first wand, the wand he was supposed to have, Harry thought, in the life that had been arranged for him, sent warm gold sparks along the floor when Harry picked it up and nearly knocked a shelf over, and Harry set it down quickly. Interesting, Ollivander murmured. He tried others. 7, 8, 9 wands, each wrong in a way that Harry could feel precisely. The Holly wand had wanted to claim him, had pushed against his magic with the enthusiasm of something designed for a fight, and he'd felt the incompatibility like a key in the wrong lock. The others were variations on wrong in different ways. After the 11th wand, Ollivander went very still. I have something, he said, that I have never offered to a customer. He went not to the shelves but to a cabinet at the back of the shop, one with a lock rather than a latch. He opened it and took out a box that was darker than the others, ebonwood, rather than the standard cream cardboard, the hinges tarnished green. This wand, he said, setting it on the counter, was made not by me but by my great-grandmother. She made 3 wands in her life, single works, not commercial pieces, things she made because the magic required it. This is the only one whose intended owner never came." He paused. "Until possibly now." He opened the box. The wand was dark, elder, Harry recognized, and something else, a deep walnut-stained wood that he couldn't immediately identify. 13 inches. The handle wound with something that had the quality of bone, but smooth and dark. It didn't look like a wand that had been waiting to be found. It looked like a wand that had been waiting to be ready for. Harry picked it up. The shop went dark. Not a flicker, not a fluctuation, all the light simply left, every candle, every lamp, every reflected surface, all of it disappearing in the same instant, and for 3 full seconds the shop was in absolute darkness. Then the light came back, all at once, every source simultaneously. Ollivander was breathing harder than he'd been before. Harry looked at the wand in his hand. It felt like nothing, which was different from how all the others had felt. They'd all had texture, presence, a sense of being held by something as much as holding it. This one felt like an extension. Like the difference between carrying something and growing it. "What's the core?" Harry asked. "Thestral tail hair," Ollivander said. "And one other thing. My great-grandmother's notes said only that the second core came from something that had died and chosen to remain." He paused. "I have never known what that meant. I think perhaps you do." Harry looked at the wand. "Yes," he said. "Elder and blackthorn," Ollivander added. 13¼ inches. She made it for a specific kind of magic, the notes say for the one who governs the dark rather than wielding it. He looked at Harry with his pale filmed eyes. "I did not expect to see this leave my cabinet." Harry set 3 galleons on the counter. "Thank you," he said. Ollivander watched him wrap the wand box under his arm. "Mr. Potter," he said, as Harry was turning to go. "Be careful with that wand. Not because it is dangerous, but because everything around it will respond to what you are, and you are." He stopped. "You are very, very much, Mr. Potter." "I'll manage," Harry said. Outside, Narcissa was waiting. Draco was there too, leaning against the wall with the studied nonchalance of someone who had been there for a while and wasn't going to admit he'd been nervous. He looked at Harry's face and then at the wand box and then back at Harry. "Well," he said. "Elder and blackthorn," Harry said. "Thestral hair." Draco blinked. "That's a death wand." "It's a sovereignty wand," Harry corrected. Narcissa looked at the box, and her expression did something quiet and certain, the look of someone watching a piece fall into place. "Good," she said. They walked back through the alley, the 4 of them, Narcissa moving through the crowd the way she always moved, parting it by presence, and Draco talking about his hawthorn wand specifications with the pleasure of someone explaining something they know well, and Harry carrying his wand box and watching the alley around him, watching the way the magical world moved and breathed and existed. He noticed, as they passed a group of witches who went quiet and turned, that one of them was looking at his forehead. He noticed that a man on the corner who had been arguing with his companion stopped arguing when Harry was close and looked after him. He noticed that a cat sitting in the window of a closed shop followed his progress with the specific focused attention that cats give to things that are not cats. He thought, they can feel it. Not his scar, not his wand, not his history. Him. What lived in him? The thing that had been woken and was now awake and apparently could not be subtle even when he wasn't trying to be anything at all. He thought, this is what it's going to be like, then. He looked at Narcissa. Is Hogwarts ready for this? She considered the question with genuine seriousness. No, she said. But Hogwarts is several hundred years old and has survived most things. A pause. And Dumbledore is nothing if not adaptable. He's already planning his next move, Harry said. Certainly. Good, Harry said again, and meant it the same way he'd meant it in the library with the grimoire. Let him plan, let them all plan, because what I am doesn't fit in anyone's plan, and it's better that they try and find that out early than later. The elder and blackthorn wand hummed faintly inside its ebonwood box, warm against his arm. The true Dark Lord of Britain walked out of Diagon Alley into the ordinary London afternoon, carrying his school supplies, and did not look like anything in particular, and was absolutely everything. Chapter 3, The Sorting. The Hogwarts Express left at 11 o'clock sharp, and Harry arrived at King's Cross at 10:45 because Narcissa had strong feelings about punctuality and had instilled them with the gentle persistence of someone who believes lateness is a form of disrespect to yourself more than to others. Platform 9 3/4 materialized on the other side of the barrier the way it always did, a wall of red steam and noise and the particular organized chaos of 100 families saying goodbye simultaneously. The Hogwarts Express sat along the platform like something out of another century, brass fittings gleaming, the engine breathing slow white clouds into the autumn air. Narcissa had walked him to the barrier. Draco was ahead of them already, having gone through with Lucius, who had come to see his son off with the formal pride of a man attending a significant event. Harry had watched Lucius grip Draco's shoulder at the barrier and say something low, and Draco had nodded with the specific expression of someone receiving instructions they've heard before and intend to follow in their own fashion. At the barrier, Narcissa straightened Harry's jacket collar, an unnecessary gesture. The collar was fine, and looked at him. "You know what to do," she said. "I do. Owl me when you're settled." "I will." She looked at him for a moment longer, the way she looked at things she was not going to say out loud. Then she put her hand briefly against the side of his face, the closest she came to the open affection she'd probably have given him if he'd come to her differently, younger, without the particular complication of what he was, and then she let go and stepped back. "Go," she said. He went. The train was already half full when he found a compartment near the middle, and he'd barely settled in when Draco appeared at the door with the self-possession of someone who has determined this is the correct compartment and is not requesting permission. "There are already third years in the front half and they're being insufferable," Draco announced, dropping into the seat opposite. "The red-haired one from Malfoy's, the Weasley boy, is in the next car with someone I didn't recognize." "Leave him alone," Harry said. "I wasn't going to do anything." "You were going to do something." "I was going to introduce myself," Draco said, which technically could have meant anything. He looked out the window. "Father expects me in Slytherin." "I know. Where do you think you'll go?" Harry watched the platform moving past the window as the train began to pull away. Narcissa was a silver-haired figure getting smaller, standing with the composed stillness of someone who had done what she could and was satisfied with it. "I don't know," he said, which was not the same as not having a preference, but was the honest answer. The compartment filled up over the next 20 minutes. Not with strangers exactly, because Harry found that most people who pushed open the door, took one look at the two of them, and then either came in or didn't with unusual decisiveness, as if the room had already made a statement. A boy named Blaise Zabini came in, regarded them both, nodded at Draco with the familiarity of someone who runs in the same social circles, and sat down with the elegant detachment of someone who had decided to be present without committing to investment. A girl named Pansy Parkinson arrived immediately after, having clearly been looking for Draco, and spent a few minutes talking at speed about something that had happened at her cousin's house over the summer. Harry listened and looked out the window and thought about the grimoires section on the deep structure of Hogwarts ward magic. Selwyn had covered it, but there were gaps, things the historical record was vague on, and he was curious about what it would feel like from inside. The door opened again and Hermione Granger looked in, holding a book and carrying the expression of someone who has already tried 3 other compartments and found them wanting for different reasons. She looked at Harry. "You don't mind, do you?" "Everywhere else has." "Sit down," Harry said. She sat. Draco looked at her with the careful neutrality he'd been practicing since Flourish and Blots. Blaise looked at her once, classified her as interesting enough, monitoring for further developments, and went back to his own book. Pansy started to say something and caught Harry's eye and decided not to. Hermione opened her book, looked at its pages for approximately 90 seconds, then looked up. Did you end up buying the blood theory text? Read it in August, Harry said. So did I. She leaned forward slightly. The third chapter, where he argues that blood-based magic is essentially just concentrated inherited intent, do you think that's actually right, or is it a useful simplification? Useful simplification, Harry said immediately. Inherited intent is part of it, but it doesn't account for first-generation strong magic. There are too many cases. The mechanism has to be something older than family lines. That's what I thought too. She sat back with the specific satisfaction of a hypothesis confirmed by a second data point. No one I've talked to about it agrees. They either say it doesn't matter because it's just theory, or they say I must be wrong because Goshawk wrote it, and Goshawk doesn't write wrong things. Goshawk writes excellent practical guides, Harry said. His theoretical work is workmanlike. Exactly, she said, and looked at him with the warm competitive focus she'd had in the bookshop, the look of someone who has found someone keeping up. Draco was watching this exchange with the expression of someone recalculating. He looked at Hermione. You read blood theory in August. Before school. I've read most of the first-year curriculum, she said, slightly defensively. So has he, Draco said, nodding at Harry. He's read most of the fifth-year curriculum too. I know, Hermione said. He told me. That's actually, how much of the fifth-year practical work have you covered? Some, Harry said. Because the defense curriculum has this enormous gap in fourth and fifth year where it jumps from theory to application without any, they talked for the rest of the journey. Draco joined in after the first hour, as Harry had known he would, because Draco's self-image as the best-prepared student on the train was being cheerfully dismantled by two people who'd each done it differently, and he couldn't not engage. Blaise made occasional sharp contributions from behind his book, demonstrating a strategic intelligence he'd been keeping understated. Pansy listened and contributed more than she'd seemed likely to at first, and showed a quick lateral thinking that Harry filed and didn't forget. By the time the trolley came, something had happened in the compartment that hadn't been planned. A group of people who'd come together by convergence had become, tentatively, something else. A shape had formed, still soft around the edges, not yet decided, but present. Harry bought two of everything and distributed it without ceremony, which made Draco raise his eyebrows and then say nothing. The boats. The castle. Harry had read descriptions of Hogwarts, had read quite a few. The word magnificent appeared in most of them, and ancient, and vast. None of the descriptions had prepared him for what it did, which was breathe back at him. He felt at the moment the boat crossed the lake's midpoint. A pulse of recognition, identical in quality to what he'd felt from the manor's wards but an order of magnitude larger, not a ward recognizing a guest but something structural, foundational, recognizing something it had been designed around. Or possibly something it was designed for. He made no outward sign of this. In the boat beside him, Draco was staring up at the lit windows of the castle with what he was trying to hide as wonder. On Harry's other side, Hermione had stopped talking, and was simply looking, and her face in the castle's reflected light was purely open, all the formidable architecture of her intelligence momentarily suspended by something that bypassed it entirely. Harry looked at the castle. The castle, he felt quite clearly, looked back. There you are, it said, in no language that used words. Here I am, he thought, in the same language. Professor McGonagall met them in the entrance hall with the precise efficiency of a woman who had done this 31 times and had it to a science. She explained the sorting briefly, answered no questions because she left no space for questions, and led them to wait outside the great hall while the school settled. Harry stood near the back of the group, watching. Around him, first years processed the castle in different ways: awe, nerves, competitive assessment, one girl quietly crying from overwhelm while her friend held her elbow. Ron Weasley was near the front, craning to see around the corner. A boy named Neville Longbottom was standing very still with the expression of someone holding on. Draco had positioned himself with Blaise in a way that looked casual and was tactical. Hermione was the only one who turned and looked at Harry, a quick, sharp look, the look of someone checking a variable. He met her eyes and she looked back at the front again, apparently satisfied. The doors opened. The Great Hall was everything the description said and worse, because the ceiling had been charmed to show the night sky, and the night sky tonight was extraordinary, clear and black and scattered with the specific density of stars that you only see far from cities, and Harry looked up at it and felt the thing in his chest, the door, the darkness behind it, the sovereignty, respond to it quietly and immediately, the way it responded to all genuine dark. He kept walking. He kept his face arranged. The Sorting Hat sat on its stool at the front of the hall with the rumpled patience of something very old that has learned to wait without boredom. For tables stretched the length of the hall, 400 students turned to watch, and the hat opened what served as its mouth and sang. Harry listened to the song with most of his attention on the hat itself, the object, the ancient binding charm that ran through it. He could feel the complexity of it from where he was standing, decades of Dumbledore's magical signature woven through the original enchantment like maintenance work on an old building, and under that, much older, something that had been there since the founders and smelled, in the magical sense, like the deep bedrock of the castle itself. The sorting began. Names called, students went up, sat, were sorted. The hall responded to each one, noise, applause, reactions varying by house, which told Harry a great deal about the specific social dynamics of each table before he'd spoken to anyone in them. Hermione Granger, Gryffindor, almost before she'd sat down, the hat barely touching her head. She walked to the table with the expression of someone who had predicted this outcome and is satisfied but not surprised. Harry watched the Gryffindor table receive her. A red-haired girl in second year made room enthusiastically. Hermione sat, looked across at Harry, raised her chin slightly. He nodded. Draco Malfoy, Slytherin, also immediately, the hat's brim barely settling before it called out the house. Draco walked to his table with the practiced ease of someone who had expected this and was performing the not being pleased about something he was very pleased about. He sat beside Blaise, who had gone 3 names earlier, and caught Harry's eye across the hall. Harry read his expression. Your turn. Potter, Harry. The hall went quiet. Not the ordinary between-name quiet. Something else, a suspension that moved from the staff table outward to the students, a ripple of held breath. Harry heard his name being whispered behind its own echo, and watched the entire room process it simultaneously, Potter, which meant the boy who lived, which meant the famous one, which meant we've been waiting for this name since September 1st. He walked to the stool. He sat down. He looked straight ahead, which meant he was looking directly at the staff table, at Professor Dumbledore who sat in the central chair and whose hands had stilled on the table in front of him, his expression carrying a studied calm that Harry recognized as active work. The Sorting Hat dropped onto his head. And then the hat said, "Oh." Not out loud. Just to him. Just in the space between hat and skull where the sorting was done. "Oh," it said again. Then, with the unsteady quality of something that had been doing a job for 1,000 years and had just found the one thing it didn't have a category for, "I've read about you." Or, not you exactly. The concept of you. There's a chapter in the founder's own notes. Helga Hufflepuff wrote it, actually. She was always the one who thought past the immediate problem. What does it say? Harry thought. It says that one day something would come that all 4 houses would recognize equally. That it would be wrong to sort it into any single one because sorting implies division and this doesn't divide. The hat paused. "I have to be honest with you, Mr. Potter. In 1,000 years, I have never been in this position. You fit all 4. Not partially, completely. You have the courage, the ambition, the wisdom, the loyalty, each in full measure, each genuine, none of them performance. And underneath all of them, Harry felt it probe deeper, felt it touch the thing behind the door, and the hat went very quiet. "Ah," it said. "Yes. I see. "So where do you put me?" Harry asked. "The founder's note says that such a one should name their own house," the hat said. Helga called it the sovereign's prerogative. "The school itself will accept the choice, whatever it is." "What would you do?" Harry asked. "I would," the hat said slowly, "put you where you would be most useful. And most yourself. And most visible to the people who need to understand what they are dealing with." A pause. "But I suspect you already know where that is." Harry did. He thought it clearly, calmly, without the anxiety that the choice was supposed to come with. The sorting hat lifted off his head and faced the hall. The silence had stretched long enough that the room had moved from anticipation to unease. The staff table had several expressions worth cataloguing, McGonagall with an expression of formal concentration that was covering something else, Quirrell, the defense teacher, Harry noted, looking pale and jumpy in a way that was interesting, seeming to lean slightly backward. Dumbledore's hands had moved from the table to his lap where they weren't visible. A potions professor Harry identified as Snape from the description he'd been given had gone very still. "Slytherin," the hat called. And then, before the Slytherin table had finished its first cheer, the hat added, and Harry had no idea it was going to do this, had not asked for it and had not expected it, in a voice that was much larger than its first call, carrying to every corner of the hall with the peculiar resonance of very old magic speaking at full register, "And let the record note, chosen freely, as is the right of the sovereign. The school recognizes." The hall did not know what to do with this. For approximately 4 seconds, 400 people and a dozen staff sat in the specific suspended silence of a room that has just received information it doesn't have a framework for processing. Then several things happened at once. The Slytherin table erupted, Gryffindor started arguing with itself, and every candle in the Great Hall flared simultaneously to twice its height, sending gold light blazing up toward the enchanted ceiling. Harry stood up from the stool, set the hat back on it, and walked to the Slytherin table. The table received him with the noise of something that had been told to be pleased and was, but underneath the pleasure was a more complicated thing, the awareness that something had just happened that they didn't fully understand and that was somehow both theirs and beyond them. Draco was on his feet, and his face had the expression Harry had seen a handful of times, the one where everything Draco was performing fell away and something genuine came through. "The school recognized," Draco said. The hat literally announced it. "I know," Harry said, sitting down. "That doesn't happen." "No," Harry agreed. "Zabini owes me 2 galleons," Draco said, and sat back down. At the staff table, Dumbledore was looking at Harry with the expression he'd had at the Leaky Cauldron, the one that was not quite awe and not quite concern and contained elements of both. Then his eyes moved to Snape, and something passed between them, and Snape's expression, which was generally the expression of a man deeply dissatisfied with the quality of the world around him, had become something more complicated. Professor Snape, Harry had learned from Narcissa's extensive briefing, had been a Death Eater who turned spy and was now bound by oaths to Dumbledore and to the memory of Lily Potter. He was intelligent, vindictive, capable of great cruelty and also of a fierce and quiet loyalty that he kept entirely hidden. He hated Harry's father and had loved Harry's mother, and these two facts existed in him in permanent, unresolved war. He was also, if the old texts were accurate about the way the seal interacted with pre-existing dark magical oaths, technically in Harry's service. Not Dumbledore's. Not anyone else's. The seal commanded a specific kind of precedence in the hierarchy of dark magical bonds, and Snape had made a dark oath, the unbreakable vow or something close to it, Harry suspected, and the seal superseded it. Snape didn't know this yet. Harry thought, that conversation is going to be interesting. The feast materialized. The hall returned to the business of being 400 people in a room with food, and the noise rebuilt itself from the unusual silence like weather reforming after a strange break. Harry ate and listened and made a map of the room, who sat where, who talked to whom, which relationships were chosen and which were inherited, which faces had watched him walk to the Slytherin table with something other than house pride. There were more of the latter than expected. Several Ravenclaws. A Hufflepuff prefect. 3 Gryffindors, one of whom was Hermione, who was watching him from across the hall with the specific look of someone storing data. He caught her eye and raised his glass slightly. She did the same, with a faint expression that meant, "We'll discuss this later." Across the table, Blaise Zabini was doing the careful thing he always did, watching everyone while appearing to watch no one, and said, without looking at Harry directly, "The staff table is going to be a problem." "Some of them," Harry said. "Quirrell specifically. He's been looking at you since you sat down." A pause. "Not the way the others look. Different quality." Harry knew. He'd felt it, actually, a pulling sensation, the specific kind of magnetic unease he'd learned to associate with dark magic that was trying to behave like it wasn't dark magic. Something behind Quirrell's eyes that wasn't Quirrell. Something that recognized the seal the way you recognize a language you learned first, in your bones and before conscious thought. He said, "Keep watching him." "Obviously," Blaise said. Draco had heard enough to be paying attention. "Is there a problem with Quirrell?" "Potentially," Harry said. "I'll need to spend some time near the defense classroom." "He's the teacher," Draco said. "I know." A pause. "You're going to do something about it," Draco said. It wasn't a question. "When I understand it properly," Harry said. Draco processed this. "Then, let me know what you need." This was the thing about Draco that had taken the longest to understand and had become the most important, not the performance of loyalty, not the political calculation of aligning with the more powerful entity, but the actual bedrock of it, the thing Harry had found gradually over 4 years of shared space and argument and the slow accumulation of moments that meant something. Draco's loyalty, once given, was structural. He didn't ungive it. Harry looked at him. "I know," he said, which was different from thank you and meant more. After the feast, the Slytherin prefect, a 6th-year named Gemma Farley, led the first years through the castle to the dungeons, explaining the password and the common room rules and the particular geography of underground living with the brisk efficiency of someone who has done this before and finds it mostly beneath her. The common room was greenlit and low-ceilinged, the lake visible through the windows as a dark moving weight, and the first year spread out through it with the collective relief of having arrived somewhere they could stop performing bewilderment. Harry found a chair near the window and sat, and the lake pressed its darkness against the glass above him, and he felt the castle doing its constant low-frequency acknowledgement around him, the wards breathing with the slow rhythm of something that had been doing it for centuries. A girl named Millicent Bulstrode sat across from him and looked at him with the direct assessment of someone not invested in politeness. "What did the hat mean?" she asked. "The sovereign thing." "Exactly what it said," Harry said. "Which is what?" "That I chose freely and the school agreed," Harry said. "Some of the old magic still tracks those distinctions." She considered this with the expression of someone deciding whether it was worth pursuing. "My gran talks about old magic. Says it's different from what they teach." "It is," Harry said. "It's not worse or better. It's older and less interested in the categories we use now." Millicent nodded slowly. "And you know it?" "Some of it," Harry said. "I'm learning more." She sat back. "Okay," she said, which was Millicent's version of "I've decided you're real," as Harry would come to understand. Draco appeared with a plate of food he'd somehow smuggled from the feast. He set it on the arm of Harry's chair with the casualness of someone who had been feeding Harry since age 7 and saw no reason to make it significant. "You didn't eat enough at dinner." "I ate fine." "You had 2 bread rolls and some chicken." "That's fine." "It's not fine, you always do this when you're thinking about something." "I'm not." Harry looked at the plate. Then he took a bread roll. Draco looked satisfied in the controlled way he was satisfied with things. He sat in the next chair and lowered his voice. "The other Slytherin first years are going to want to sort themselves out pretty quickly. Figure out hierarchy." "Let them," Harry said. "You're going to be at the top of it whether you want to or not." "I know." Just, make sure it's your version of the top, Draco said. Not the old version. Not the way it was when Father was here. Harry looked at him, because this was the thing Draco would not usually say directly. The acknowledgement that the Slytherin hierarchy his father had shaped was built on things Draco had grown up around enough to see clearly if he chose to. He was choosing to. He was telling Harry to make it something else. Yeah, Harry said. That's the plan. The first week of classes was straightforward in the way that things are straightforward when you've already read the material and are primarily interested in the gaps. Harry moved through the curriculum with the patience of someone who wasn't there for what was being taught at the front of the classroom and was there for what the classroom contained: the books, the teachers, the students, the structure of how knowledge was being organized and distributed and what was being kept back. Charms was taught by Flitwick, who was sharp and warm and genuinely loved the subject, and whose class Harry paid attention to because the fine work of precise incantation was something he could always develop further. Transfiguration was McGonagall, who ran her classroom like a well-maintained machine and who looked at Harry for the first time on the first day with the expression of someone who has been told something about a student and is now forming their own opinion, and whose opinion, Harry could tell, was going to be complicated. Potions was Snape. Harry arrived at Potions on Thursday. The dungeon classroom was cold in the specific way that stone is cold when it's deep underground and close to water, and smelled of things that had been heating in enclosed spaces for decades, and the walls were covered in shelves of preserved specimens that looked at you with the particular dispassion of things suspended permanently. Snape was already at the front when Harry came in, standing with his arms folded and his expression arranged in the specific coldness of a man who had been in this room for 15 years and found it appropriately miserable. Harry sat down. Draco was beside him, then Blaise, then Millicent. Snape began the lesson with a speech about the complexity and precision of potions, clearly well practiced, clearly designed to establish the register of the classroom. This is serious, I am serious, impress me or face consequences. Then he started moving through the class with questions. He asked Harry, what would I get if I added powdered root of asphodel to an infusion of wormwood? It was a trap, Harry knew. From the potions chapter Narcissa's contact at Hogwarts had mentioned Snape used every year to wrongfoot the famous student, a question designed to establish that the boy who lived didn't know things Snape considered basic. The draft of living death, Harry said. Asphodel and wormwood together produce a soporific compound at the molecular level. The wormwood's active component acts as a suspension catalyst for the asphodel. It's one of the most powerful sleeping drafts in the wizarding pharmacopoeia. He paused. The phrase is also a quote. Asphodel is a plant associated with regret for the dead in classical symbolism. Wormwood means bitterness or grief. As a combined phrase it functions as an expression of extreme remorse. He looked at Snape steadily. I'd guess the person who named it was making a statement about the circumstances in which you'd need it. The classroom was very quiet. Snape looked at him. Something was happening in his expression that was not the contempt he deployed reflexively, something much more complicated, working through his face in layers. The dark eyes were sharp and assessing and, underneath the assessment, doing something that Harry thought might be the beginning of a reckoning. Where did the bezoar come from? Snape asked, still watching Harry. Stomach of a goat, Harry said. Acts as an antidote to most poisons. The mechanism is still not fully understood, which I find interesting given that it's been in use for 2,000 years. And what is the difference, Snape said, very quietly now, between monkshood and wolfsbane? They're the same plant, Harry said. Also called aconite. The nomenclature split happened in the 15th century and is purely regional. He held Snape's gaze. The question you're actually asking is whether I know them as the same, which tells you something about how I was taught. Snape was still for a long moment. He turned away and moved to the next student, and Harry watched his robes sweep and thought, he knows. Not everything. But something just shifted in him. Some oath just pulled in a direction it hasn't pulled before. Draco, leaning very slightly toward Harry, said under his breath, you could have just answered the questions. I did answer the questions, Harry murmured back. You know what I mean. He needed to know what he's teaching, Harry said quietly. Better for both of us. Draco looked at him for a moment. Then he shook his head and picked up his quill. The encounter he'd been putting off happened on Friday. He'd been exploring the castle, methodically, level by level, mapping not the physical geography but the magical one, the way wards overlapped and where the old enchantments ran thick and where they were thin, the places where the castle was most itself versus the places where centuries of headmasters had added their own modifications. He did this alone, in the hour before curfew, moving with the confidence of someone who had been navigating the manor's ward since age 8 and knew what to look for. The third-floor corridor was interesting because of what it contained at the far end, something large, breathing wrong, magical in a way that had sharp edges, behind a locked door whose lock was more interesting than the standard charm and whose wards had Dumbledore's signature all over them. Harry stood outside it, felt the shape of whatever was inside, and catalogued it for later. He was on his way back from the third floor when Quirrell came around the corner. Not accidentally. Harry knew immediately it wasn't accidentally, because Quirrell had the quality of someone who had been waiting in the direction they were coming from, and because the thing behind his eyes, the thing that wasn't Quirrell, lit up when it saw Harry with the specific response of two charged objects coming into proximity. Mr. Potter, Quirrell said, with the nervous stammer he used as cover for something much less nervous. Out are rather late. Walking, Harry said. He stood still, let the distance between them stay where it was. You've been watching me in class. The stammer wobbled. I keep an eye on all my, not the way you watch me, Harry said. Something in you knows what I am. Doesn't it? Quirrell went very still. The stammer fell away. Just for a moment, the edges of his face did something that wasn't Quirrell, a shadow of a different personality moving behind the front one, like light flickering under a door. Then the stammer came back, but shaken, poorly reassembled. I don't know what you're carrying someone, Harry said. In you. Or on you. Hosting. He cocked his head. It's old magic. Possession and hosting without full dominion. You have to be maintaining some form of consent or the host dies. So there's cooperation here. He watched Quirrell's face. Is it voluntary? The silence stretched 3 seconds. Then, very quietly, something else spoke out of Quirrell's mouth, not the stammer, not the nervous professor, something older and thinner and with the particular cold quality of something used to being obeyed. You are remarkable, it said. Even now. Even in a child's body and a school corridor. You're weaker than the stories suggest, Harry said. The hosting is a stopgap. What are you here for? I should think you know, Voldemort said, through Quirrell's mouth. The stone, Harry said. Third-floor corridor. Dumbledore's hiding it. He looked at Quirrell, at the man who was behind the other presence, the pale nervous man who was still in there somewhere, and then back at the thing wearing his face. What is it you're expecting me to do? Help you? I was hoping, Voldemort said, with the ancient careful quality of something that has not abandoned ambition, for recognition. We are alike, you and I, in ways that, we're not alike, Harry said. No? Something like amusement moved through Quirrell's face. You carry my mark. My power touched you first. You walk in darkness, I govern darkness, Harry said. You tried to own it. Those are completely different things. He looked at Quirrell's face steadily. You fragmented yourself chasing something you don't understand. The thing you're afraid of, death, is not your enemy. It's a system. And you are so terrified of it you can't see that you've been fighting your own nature. A pause. You sound, Voldemort said, like someone who has been studying. I have, Harry said. Interesting. The voice was careful. Feeling the edges of something. I came here expecting a child. I know, Harry said. I was 11 4 months ago. It must be disappointing. The faintest possible thing, not quite amusement, not quite unease, something threaded between them that had no ordinary name. Then, what do you want, Mr. Potter? Right now? To finish my walk and get to bed before curfew. He turned slightly. You should leave Quirrell. Not for his sake particularly, though that too. But because this body is running out of time, and if Dumbledore finds you here in this state before you've got what you came for, you'll lose the stone and the host both. Silence. And if I don't? Voldemort asked. Harry looked back over his shoulder. Then I'll be interested to see what that looks like, he said, and I'll handle it from there. He walked back toward the Slytherin dungeons, and behind him he felt the two-layered presence of Quirrell and his passenger standing in the corridor, processing something, and the castle breathed around Harry like recognition, like agreement, like a very old building settling comfortably on its foundations. He thought, first problem identified, first move made. He thought, let's see what the next one looks like. The common room was quiet when he got back. Draco was asleep in the chair by the window with a Transfiguration text open on his chest, which was his version of studying. Blaise was at the table, still awake, looked up when Harry came in. Productive walk? Blaise said. Very, Harry said. Blaise looked at him for a moment with the careful intelligence he kept understated. Should I be worried? Not about anything immediate, Harry said. He sat, picked up the Transfiguration text from Draco's chest carefully, set it on the table. Draco didn't wake. There are moving pieces. I'm watching them. That's not an answer. It's the answer I have right now, Harry said. When I have a better one, I'll tell you. Blaise accepted this with the equanimity of someone who had decided that Harry's qualified honesty was more useful than most people's complete certainty, and went back to his book. Harry looked at the window. The lake was a dark weight outside the glass, and deep in it, barely visible, something large and ancient moved. The castle breathed. The seal hummed against his forehead like a compass that had found its north and locked. He was exactly where he was supposed to be. Chapter 4. The dark stirs. November came in hard, driving cold rain against the castle windows and making the corridors smell like wet stone and whatever the house elves were cooking 3 floors down. Quidditch season had started, which meant half the school had opinions about broom specifications, and the other half had opinions about the people with opinions about broom specifications, and the whole thing created a low-level social weather that Harry found mildly entertaining to map. He had more important things occupying his attention. Quirrell had pulled back after the corridor encounter, not obviously, not in ways that the staff would notice, but Harry felt the distance. The two-layered presence that had been pushing toward him since the sorting had retreated to a careful remove, like a chess player who had made a move and was now watching to see what it meant. In defense class, Quirrell taught his stuttering, badly structured lessons and looked at Harry with the expression of a man carrying a conversation partner who had not stopped talking about what had happened. Harry let him pull back. He used the time. He had mapped the 3rd-floor corridor completely by the 2nd week, not just the locked door but everything feeding into it, the sequence of protective enchantments layered behind it, the specific magical signatures of each challenge. Dumbledore's signature was everywhere, but not only Dumbledore's. McGonagall, Flitwick, Sprout, each had contributed something, a collaborative defense, the kind you built when you were protecting something significant and had the good sense to know that single-layer defenses were invitations. Harry read the layers the way Caius Selwyn had taught him to read old contracts, not the surface, but what each decision told you about the people who made it and what they were afraid of. What they were afraid of was someone getting through without understanding the rules of the system. The defenses were all system-based, puzzles, logic, the assumption that raw power wasn't the issue, that brute force would fail and cleverness would proceed. That was very Dumbledore. That was the thinking of a man who believed in the rightness of earned knowledge over inherited power, which was philosophically consistent and tactically limited. Harry made notes. He did not go through the door. He was also watching Quirrell deteriorate. It was slow, the way that things are slow when you're inside them. Quirrell had been pale and nervous in September. By November he was pale and drawn and sometimes forgot the stammer for whole sentences before catching himself, and in the staff room after dinner, if you were quiet enough near the door, you could hear something that sounded like two people arguing in the same voice. The hosting was taking its toll. Voldemort was not a gentle passenger. Harry had one other meeting with him in November, and it happened not in a corridor but in the library, which was either reckless or deliberate, and Harry suspected the latter. He was in the restricted section. He'd acquired the relevant permissions from Flitwick, who had written him a pass without much fuss once Harry had demonstrated he was actually reading the restricted texts and not collecting them as trophies, when he became aware of being watched. He didn't look up from the book he was reading. "You're using the professor's eyes," he said. Quirrell stepped out from behind a shelf. His face was doing the thing it did when Voldemort was running the front, the subtle wrongness, the precision behind the eyes that didn't match the nervousness of the rest of him. "You can tell the difference. The stammer goes when you're not thinking about it," Harry said. "And you move differently." Voldemort tilted Quirrell's head. "What are you reading?" Harry showed him the cover, Fragmentary Souls, a study in divided magical consciousness. He watched the thing behind Quirrell's eyes process this with something that was not quite readable but had the texture of discomfort. "Homework?" Voldemort said. "Research," Harry said. He closed the book. "You've been thinking about what I said." "I think about most things." "The fragment question specifically," Harry said. "You know what I know, or you've guessed it. That what you did to yourself, the fragmentation, isn't immortality. It's dispersal. You exist in more places but less completely in each one." Quirrell's jaw worked. "The alternative was death." "You keep saying that like death is the worst outcome," Harry said. "Like you didn't spend your whole life studying magic that operates specifically through death, sacrifice, blood wards, the power in a killing curse. You know better than almost anyone that death isn't cessation. It's transition." A pause. Something moved through Quirrell's face, a crack in the performance, or maybe in the thinking behind it, something that was not the ancient cold precision but something older and rawer underneath it. "You are 11 years old," Voldemort said. "Yes," Harry said. "And you are the most powerful dark wizard in a century, reduced to sharing a body with a nervous man in a school because you're afraid of something that is a natural part of the magical system you spent your whole life mastering." He paused. "That seems like a problem worth examining." Quirrell was quiet for a long time. In the library, the candles guttered in a draft from somewhere, and the shelves of restricted books stood around them like an audience. Something in the air had the quality of the corridor conversation but deeper, the sense that what was being said was working its way through layers of belief and habit and arriving somewhere. "You want the stone," Harry said. "I'm not going to help you get it." "I wasn't asking for help." "You keep finding me in corridors and libraries," Harry said. "You're either asking for help or you want to be talked out of it. I'm not sure which." The silence stretched. "The stone is a means to an end," Voldemort said finally. "What I want is a body. Continuity. The ability to act in the world as more than a fragment." "Then there are other ways," Harry said. "Better ways. The stone's method is borrowed, you'd be extending a half-existence, not resolving it." He paused. "But that's your decision. What I'm telling you is that if you go through that corridor, Dumbledore will know, and what you'll face at the end of it won't be surmountable in your current state." Quirrell's eyes narrowed. "You sound like you want me to survive." "I want you to be comprehensible," Harry said. "You're going to be in my life for years regardless. I'd prefer you coherent when that happens." Something happened in Quirrell's face that Harry couldn't fully read, a complex movement, quick and gone. Then the stammer came back, fully, and with it the Quirrell personality reasserting itself, blinking and slightly disoriented, and Harry watched the man's eyes come back into focus and saw the moment Quirrell realized where he was and what was in front of him and went pale in the way of someone who had recently not been in charge of their own face. "Mr. Peapotter," Quirrell said. I'm not sure why. "Good night, Professor," Harry said. He gathered his books and left. Outside the library, Hermione was waiting in the corridor with 3 books under her arm and the expression of someone who had been watching the closed door and calculating. "You were in there for 20 minutes more than you needed to be," she said. "I read slowly," Harry said. "You don't read slowly." She fell into step beside him. They had developed the habit of moving through the castle together in the evening. It had started with overlapping research interests and had become something more functional, 2 people who worked better with someone nearby who could be trusted not to derail the thinking. The defense professor was in there. "I know. You talked to him." "Briefly." She was quiet for a moment, which was her way of saying I have questions and I'm choosing which one to lead with. "Is he dangerous?" Harry considered this. "Yes. But not to us. Not right now." "That's not the same as no." "I know," he said. "I'm working on it." She looked at him sidelong. They were on the 2nd floor staircase and the torches threw moving light across the stone, and she had the expression she got when she was deciding how much to trust something. She had deployed this expression at Harry several times over the previous months, and each time the result had been that she trusted him and was proved right to, which had done something to the ledger she kept. "Is this about the 3rd floor corridor?" she said. Harry stopped walking. Looked at her. "I've been researching," she said, slightly defensive and not quite apologetic. "The protections feel layered when you walk past, even from the staircase, there's a magical density. And I found a reference in a library history text to a set of protections the staff installed over summer. 7 distinct enchantments." She pulled a folded piece of parchment from her robe. "I cross-referenced the staff specialties. Dumbledore, McGonagall, Flitwick, Sprout, Quirrell, Snape, and one I can't identify that feels older than the rest." Harry looked at the parchment. Her notes were meticulous, color-coded, cross-referenced, with question marks in 3 places where her evidence was inconclusive. "Fluffy," he said. "I'm sorry." "The first protection. Something large and 3-headed, probably a Cerberus-type creature. Hagrid's work most likely, the older signature." He handed the parchment back. "The others in sequence, McGonagall's chessboard, Sprout's devil's snare, Flitwick's winged keys, Snape's potion logic, Quirrell's troll, which is probably the weakest, given the current state of Quirrell, and Dumbledore's mirror." She stared at him. "Mirror of Eriste," he said. "It shows you what you want most. It's being used as the final protection because Dumbledore believes that only someone who wants to find the stone but not use it will be able to retrieve it." "And what's being protected?" she asked, though her expression suggested she already had a theory. "Philosopher's Stone," Harry said. "Nicholas Flamel's. It produces the elixir of life." Hermione processed this in the rapid way she processed things, not slowly, but in sequence, each inference building on the last with the precision of someone whose mind was a very good machine when it had sufficient inputs. "Voldemort," she said. "He's trying to get it. To restore himself." "Yes. And Quirrell is his, he's hosting, yes." She was quiet for 3 full seconds, which was a long time for her. "You've known since the sorting." "Since before the sorting. I felt it on the boat." She looked at him. "And you haven't told Dumbledore?" "No." "Why not?" "Because Dumbledore already knows," Harry said. "Or suspects strongly enough that it amounts to the same thing. The stone is here because he moved it from Gringotts in July, the day after someone tried to break in." He watched her face do the arithmetic. "He knows someone is after it. He put protections around it. He's waiting to see how it plays out. He's using it as a trap," she said. "He's using it as a test," Harry said. Which is both better and worse? For Quirrell? For me, Harry said. She absorbed this. Looked at the wall. Looked back at him. He wants to see what you do. He wants to see if I'll come to him with it. Whether I'll slot myself into the plan. Harry started walking again, and she matched his pace. Which means I need to solve it without the plan. On my own terms. Before Quirrell makes his move. She said. He looked at her. We need to solve it, she said. I've already mapped 5 of the 7 protections from the outside. I can probably work through Sprout's devil's snare blindfolded at this point. And the potion logic puzzle, that's straightforward if you know your Snape, and I've been paying very close attention to Snape. He looked at her for a long moment. You're volunteering yourself into something dangerous. I'm pointing out that I'm already in it, she said crisply. I've been researching it for weeks. The only difference is whether I'm doing it with you or separately. She adjusted the books under her arm. Together is more efficient. He thought about it. He thought about Draco, who would want to be involved and whose involvement would need managing not because he wasn't capable but because the Draco problem had political dimensions that complicated the approach. He thought about Blaise, who was watching everything and would draw his own conclusions and was probably already several steps ahead of where Hermione had been last week. He thought about the mirror of Ariste at the end of the corridor. What he'd want most, standing before it. He thought, better not to stand before it long. You'll follow my lead, he said. On the approach, she said. Inside the protections, if there's a problem I have a better solution to, I'll tell you. Agreed, he said. She nodded, once, with the expression of someone who has just made a deal they find satisfactory. Draco's reaction, when Harry told him at breakfast the next morning, was to set down his fork, take a breath through his nose, and say, and I'm not coming because. Because if you come and something goes wrong, you're the one with a name that creates political fallout, Harry said. And because your absence needs to be accountable, I need someone outside who knows the timeline and can act if we're not back. Draco processed this. That's a job. It's an important job, Harry said. It's a waiting job. Blaise will be with you, Harry said. Blaise, who had been eating in tranquil silence, looked up and said, Will I? Yes, Harry said. Someone should have asked me about this, Blaise said pleasantly. Would you have said no? A pause. No, Blaise said. He went back to his food. But the asking is nice. Sorry, Harry said. Blaise, will you wait with Draco and monitor the situation? Delighted, Blaise said, with the dry warmth he deployed when something was genuinely fine. Draco looked at Harry. When? Soon, Harry said. When Quirrell moves. He's close, I can feel it. He's running out of time in the hosting, and Voldemort's patience has limits. He looked at his breakfast. It'll be before Christmas. He was right by 10 days. The night Quirrell moved, Harry felt it, woke from sleep at 2:30 in the morning with the certainty of it, the same way he felt weather before it broke. He lay still for 3 seconds, let the feeling sharpen, then got up and dressed in the dark. Draco was a light sleeper. He was awake and sitting up by the time Harry reached the dormitory door. Now? Draco said quietly. Now, Harry said. I'm coming with, 3rd floor corridor, I'll be back before 5, Harry said. If I'm not, get McGonagall. Harry, before 5, Harry repeated. He found Hermione at the foot of the main staircase, already dressed, apparently having had the same instinct or having been watching for signs of Quirrell's movement. She had her wand out and her bag over her shoulder and looked at him with sharp eyes. How much of a head start does he have? She asked. 10 minutes, maybe. He has to get past Fluffy first. They moved fast, and the castle was all shadows and torchlight and the deep night quiet of a building asleep around them. Harry moved through it with the ease of months of nighttime mapping, taking the routes where the wards were familiar, where the castle's acknowledgement of him ran thickest, using it the way you use a current rather than swimming against it. Third floor corridor. The door was already open. Through it, the smell of something large and animal and the particular warm-rot smell of a creature that ate meat. In the darkness ahead, breathing, slow and massive, in 3 overlapping rhythms. Fluffy, Hermione murmured. You said music, it responds to music. Harry wasn't thinking about music. He was thinking about what he was, what lived in the scar and behind the door in his chest and what the dark creatures of the world had always done in his presence. He crouched slightly, looked into the darkness, let the thing in him come forward the way he'd been learning to bring it, not as a weapon, not as a performance, but as presence. A statement of what he was. The breathing slowed. All 3 rhythms at once. Then stopped. Then started again, slower, the slow rhythm of sleep. Hermione made a sound beside him. Come on, Harry said. Down through the trapdoor and into Devil's Snare, which was dark and grasping, and Hermione had been right, she was through it in 40 seconds flat, while Harry moved with the stillness that plants with any degree of magical sensitivity responded to as not prey, not target, something else. Through the locked room with the keys, Harry's wand, the Elder and Blackthorn, sang in the air, and 1 key simply fell from the cloud and turned in the lock without ceremony because they were moving fast and there wasn't time for the intended method. The chessboard was wrong. Not wrong in execution, the board was intact, the pieces poised, the enchantment functioning exactly as designed. What was wrong was the state of it, a game in progress, 3 pieces already captured, white pieces displaced in a pattern Harry read in 2 seconds. Someone came through before him, Hermione said. Not before, Harry said. Quirrell stopped here. He's been here for 20 minutes. He was already reading the board, the positions, what they meant strategically. He couldn't solve it. The chess puzzle isn't solvable in the straightforward sense, Hermione said, moving to the board's edge. It's designed to be sacrificial, someone has to take a hit. Most people see it as a chivalry test, sacrifice yourself to win. Which Voldemort would never do willingly, Harry said. Right. She was already seeing the board in full. I can solve it differently. There's a path that doesn't require sacrifice if you think 6 moves ahead rather than 3. She looked at him. 2 minutes. Go, he said. She went. Her hands moved over the pieces with the certainty of someone who had been playing competitively since she was 5, and Harry watched the board rearrange in a sequence that Quirrell had apparently been unable to see, and in 90 seconds the Black King tipped over and the path cleared. The troll room, the troll unconscious, presumably Quirrell's work, lying across the floor in a heap. They moved around it. Snape's potion room, 7 bottles on a table, a riddle on a parchment, flames blocking both exits. Harry read the riddle once. Looked at the bottles. Felt the magical signatures. Snape's logic was precise and personal in a way that was almost identifiable, a specific kind of left-handed elegance in the structure of the puzzle. He picked the right bottle without hesitating. That quickly? Hermione said. Snape thinks in specific patterns, Harry said. You learn them in class if you pay attention to how he structures problems rather than just the answers. That's interesting, I'll think about that. She looked at the bottles. There's only enough in the forward bottle for 1 person. Take the back one, Harry said. Go back through the fire, get Draco, and wait. I told you, I'm Hermione. He looked at her. What's on the other side of that fire is not a puzzle. There's nothing more for you to solve in there. And I need someone I trust on the outside. He paused. That's you. She held his gaze for a moment with the particular Hermione expression of evaluating whether she was being managed or genuinely reasoned with. She found what she was looking for, apparently, because she took the back bottle and didn't argue. Before 5, she said. Before 5, he agreed. He drank the forward bottle, stepped through the last wall of flame, and came into the final chamber. The mirror of Eriste stood against the far wall, floor to ceiling, its frame ornate and tarnished, the inscription along the top reading backwards in the way that meant something in the object's original enchanting. The room smelled like old stone and something faintly warm, the specific warmth of a mirror that had been reflecting for a long time. Quirrell was standing in front of it. Quirrell was standing in front of it, and Voldemort was directing from Quirrell's back, and Harry had a moment before either of them registered his arrival to simply look at the configuration, the nervous professor, face pointed at the glass, and the face on the back of his head, visible where the turban had shifted, sharp-featured and somehow ancient and full of a desperation that it was trying to contain under the architecture of command. The stone, Voldemort was saying, through the back of Quirrell's head. Think. What do you want more than anything? Think past the surface. What do you want? Quirrell made a helpless sound. I can see myself presenting it to you, I see myself, that's not wanting it for yourself, Voldemort said. The mirror requires genuine want. You want to please me more than you want the stone itself, and that is why he won't get it, Harry said. Both faces turned. Quirrell's face was a mess, exhausted, frightened, the hosting written on him in every line. Voldemort's face, on the back of his head, turned as far as the anatomy allowed, which wasn't far, and the eyes in it were flat and pale and old. Mr. Potter, Voldemort said. You followed. You knew I would, Harry said. He crossed the room without hurrying and stopped 10 feet from the mirror and did not look into it. He had thought very carefully about not looking into it, about where he'd direct his eyes, because the mirror of Eriste was a simple concept with a deep mechanism, it reflected truth, and truth was powerful, and he didn't want to have this conversation while managing an emotion. He won't get it, Harry said again, to the mirror rather than to Voldemort, because the enchantment requires wanting it to find it, not to use it. Every version of wanting that involves you ends with using it. And what, Voldemort said, with the careful precision of something choosing its words in the specific way it did when it was thinking behind the words, do you see? I'm not looking at it, Harry said. A pause. You're afraid of what you'll see. I'm not interested in being distracted right now, Harry said. He looked at Quirrell's main face, the professor, the man, and said, this is killing you. Faster than you know. You have weeks. Quirrell's eyes were desperate. I know, he said, in his own voice, the stammer stripped out by something beyond caring about it. I know that. He promised you things he can't deliver in this state, Harry said, without cruelty in it, just fact. He needs a body. He can't give you anything from inside yours. Voldemort's voice came through, don't speak to him. He can hear me regardless, Harry said. That's the nature of the hosting. He looked at the back face, at the pale old eyes. Take the stone and what exactly happens? You have the elixir. You restore yourself with it, which means what, exactly, in your current fragmentary state? You consolidate? You don't even know if consolidation is possible anymore. You broke yourself into too many pieces to know what reassembly looks like. I know exactly what it looks like, Voldemort said. No, Harry said. You know what you hope it looks like. Those are different things. The silence in the room was the kind that happened when something was being genuinely processed rather than when people were deciding what to say. Harry moved. Not toward Quirrell, toward the mirror, standing beside it but angled away from the glass, and he reached out and put his hand flat on the frame. He felt the enchantment immediately, Dumbledore's work, and brilliant work, a structure of conditional logic that was genuinely elegant. He felt also, through the frame, what the mirror was currently reflecting to Quirrell, versions of himself holding the stone, presenting it to a fully corporeal master, being rewarded. Wanting to be enough. Through the frame he felt what the mirror had ready for him, just at the edge of his hand, and he made the decision quickly and deliberately and pulled it through without looking, felt the warmth of it, the shape of what he wanted most, let it travel up his arm and land in his chest where the door was, and he felt the mirror respond to the correct wanting, finding, not using, the want of someone who was there to contain rather than possess. And then the stone was in his hand. He hadn't looked in the mirror. He hadn't needed to. He held the stone. It was small, smaller than he'd expected, a deep red, warm in the way gemstones were warm when they'd been kept in warm spaces, dense with the specific magical weight of something containing an enormous amount of refined power. He closed his fingers around it. Quirrell made a sound. Voldemort said nothing for a moment. Then, give it to me. No, Harry said. You know what I'm capable of. You're capable of quite a lot, yes, Harry said. In better circumstances. Right now you're a fragment in a borrowed body and the stone isn't going to fix what's actually wrong, and you know that, and that's why you're still talking instead of, he stopped. Because Quirrell's hands had come up. Moving toward him. And Voldemort's voice had shifted to something harder, the patience burning off it, the ancient cold desperation coming through fully now, give me the stone or I will kill the host. Right here. He means nothing to me, he has served his purpose. Don't, Harry said. Give me, Harry looked at Quirrell's main face and said, simply and directly, step back. Something happened. It was not a spell. He hadn't used his wand. It was the seal, coming through his voice the way it had started to do occasionally in the last months, not loudly, not with the dramatics of a magical command, but with the deep subharmonic quality of something that did not ask, that simply stated, the way dark commands in the oldest magic did not work through compulsion but through recognition, the way every dark creature in a room turned toward the thing they recognized as sovereign without knowing why. Quirrell's body stepped back. Involuntarily. His own feet taking him 2 paces from Harry before either of them had processed it. Then Voldemort screamed. Not with pain, exactly, with the fury of something that had been obeyed without its consent, with the specific rage of an entity that considered dominion absolute having just experienced the edge of a dominion wider and older than its own. The sound came through both mouths at once, Quirrell's and the face on the back, and in the mirror beside Harry the reflection shattered, just the glass fracturing from corner to corner in a single crack, and the room's temperature dropped 10 degrees. Quirrell collapsed. Not dead, Harry checked immediately, 2 fingers at the professor's throat, a pulse thin and fast but present. The hosting had been failing for weeks and this had accelerated something, some breaking point. He was breathing. He was going to wake up with, Harry suspected, very little memory of the last several months. The stone was in Harry's jacket pocket. He stood in the room alone with the unconscious professor, the shattered mirror, and the specific quality of silence that settled after something large had moved through a space and gone. I felt that, he said to the room. To Voldemort's absence, the fragment that had been resident in Quirrell now displaced into the nowhere between hosts, incorporeal again, weaker, furious. He wasn't gone, the Horcruxes precluded that, but he was gone from here, and gone from Quirrell, and for now that was enough. Harry took out the stone and looked at it. He thought about what to do with it. He thought about Nicholas Flamel, who was 600 years old and alive because of this object. He thought about what the grimoire said about the nature of sovereignty, that a true Dark Lord did not accumulate power the way smaller ambitions did, didn't hoard and protect and build a stockpile of leverage. He thought about the stone specifically, about what it meant that it existed, about the specific philosophical contradiction of an immortality object existing in a world where the deepest magic was rooted in death's inevitability. He thought, Flamel would want to know. He put the stone back in his pocket and picked up Quirrell, which was awkward because he was 11 and Quirrell was a grown man, but he managed it with the assistance of a locomotor that wasn't supposed to be in his ability range and was, and they went back through the chambers. Hermione was on the other side of the flames. Draco was beside her, which meant she'd gone back for him despite being told otherwise, and both of them looked at him with expressions that mixed relief with a quantity of questions. He set Quirrell down. We need to get him to the hospital wing, he said. And then I need to see Dumbledore. It's 3:30 in the morning, Draco said. I know, Harry said. This can't wait. Did you get it? Hermione asked, looking at his pocket. Yes. And Voldemort? Gone, Harry said. For now. She nodded, let out a breath that contained several things, and then looked at Quirrell. Locomotor, she said, and the professor's body rose smoothly. I'll take him. You two go. Harry looked at her. The hospital wing is 2 floors down and Madame Pomfrey can't see both of us arriving with an unconscious professor at 3 in the morning without asking more questions than we want to answer right now, she said briskly. If I take him, I'm a first year who found him collapsed in the corridor and raised the alarm. That's clean. You two go to Dumbledore. It was correct. He'd have gotten to it in another second but she'd gotten there first, which was becoming a feature of working with her. Madame Pomfrey will have questions, he said. I can handle Madame Pomfrey, she said, with the tone of someone who has handled several adults already this evening and is not concerned about adding one more. He and Draco went. Dumbledore's office was at the top of the moving staircase behind the stone gargoyle, and Harry said lemon drop because that was the password this month according to the calendar Draco had somehow obtained, and the gargoyle stepped aside, and they went up. Dumbledore was awake. He was sitting at his desk as though he had been there for some time, wearing robes that suggested he'd dressed in a hurry or hadn't yet gone to bed, and his expression when they came through the door was the layered one, surface calm, underneath it something that was watching and processing very fast. Harry, he said. And Draco. A slight pause on the second name. Sit down. They sat. Harry took the stone from his pocket and set it on the desk between them. Dumbledore looked at it for a long moment. Then he looked at Harry. Quirrell is in the hospital wing, Harry said. He's alive. The hosting terminated. He'll need observation. He paused. Voldemort is displaced again. No host, no body, back to the interim state he's been in since 1981. Dumbledore's hands were folded on the desk. His expression had gone somewhere very still. And the stone, he said. I'm giving it to you to return to Flamel, Harry said. He should be told what happened. He deserves to know someone tried to use his life's work as a resurrection tool. He paused. And I think he and I should have a conversation at some point. When he's ready. Dumbledore looked at him. You went down there without telling me. Yes. You solved the protections and retrieved the stone and incapacitated Voldemort without. You knew he was there, Harry said. You knew Quirrell was the host. You'd known for weeks, possibly months. He held Dumbledore's gaze steadily. You set the stone as bait. You wanted to see how the pieces moved. Dumbledore was quiet. I moved the piece I chose to move, Harry said. Not the one you were expecting. No, Dumbledore said. He looked at the stone again, then at Harry, and his expression did the thing it sometimes did, the strategy falling away, something genuinely human coming through underneath. No, you didn't. He reached out and took the stone. Thank you, he said. Simply. Not strategically, not politically, genuinely. Harry nodded. Draco, who had been silent with the specific controlled silence of someone present at something significant and committed to not derailing it, said, Are we in trouble? Dumbledore looked at him with something that approached warmth. No, Draco. You're not in trouble. He looked back at Harry. I imagine we have a great deal to discuss. We do, Harry said. But not tonight. He stood, and Draco stood with him. Tonight I need to sleep. We can talk tomorrow. He was nearly to the door when Dumbledore said, Harry. He turned. The old man was looking at him across the desk with the mirrorless mirror quality of someone looking at a thing they cannot entirely categorize. What did you see? When you stood at the mirror? Harry looked at him. He had thought about this on the way up through the castle, what the mirror had given him when he'd pulled it through the frame. What he'd wanted most. A family, he said. Not blood. Not specific faces. Just, a room full of people who were there because they chose to be, and who I chose back. He paused. That's all. He left. In the corridor below the gargoyle, Draco was walking beside him, and neither of them spoke for a moment, and the castle was quiet and very dark and very present around them. Then Draco said, I wasn't supposed to come up with you. No, Harry said. You let me anyway. You were already there, Harry said. Hermione went back for you. Draco was quiet. Is she always going to do that? Go back for people? Yes, Harry said. A pause. That's, Draco said, and stopped. That's useful actually. It's more than useful, Harry said. They went back to the dungeons. The lake outside the common room windows was its deep familiar dark, pressing its enormous weight against the glass, and the fire was banked low and the room was empty and warm, and Harry sat in the chair by the window and felt the door in his chest settle to its quiet hum, the post-action stillness of something that had moved and returned. He thought about Voldemort adrift somewhere in the in-between, furious and incorporeal, carrying the memory of being overridden by something older than his own darkness. He thought, he'll come back. Properly, eventually. With a body and a plan and the weight of what he spent decades building. He thought, good. Let him. Let him come back whole and see what he's dealing with properly rather than in pieces. He looked at the dark outside the window, and the dark looked back at him the way it always did, familiar, patient, his. He went to bed. Chapter 5. What remains in the dark. The summer after first year was the last summer Harry spent at Privet Drive. He was there for 3 weeks only. Narcissa had pushed the arrangement as far as she could against the specific magical architecture of Lily Potter's sacrifice, the blood protection that Dumbledore had explained to him in a letter over the school year, carefully, with the tone of someone sharing information they'd previously withheld and hoping the sharing would register as good faith. Harry had written back and acknowledged it as exactly that, a genuine protection, real and significant, one he wasn't dismissing, and also that 3 weeks was sufficient to satisfy whatever Blood Ward renewal the magic required, and he'd be at the manor by July's first weekend. Dumbledore had not contested this. Privet Drive was Privet Drive. Vernon had developed a policy of elaborate non-acknowledgement. If he didn't look at Harry, Harry wasn't there, and the house operated on this principle with the commitment of people who found reality inconvenient and had decided to simply opt out of portions of it. Petunia occasionally forgot herself and almost asked him something before catching the question in her throat and turning back to whatever she was doing. Dudley had grown large enough and self-absorbed enough that Harry existed to him primarily as an inconvenience to navigate around, like furniture that moved. Harry spent the 3 weeks in his room, reading, writing letters, and mapping the ward structure of the house itself with the focused interest of someone who had just spent a year studying Hogwarts enchantments and found the comparison fascinating. Lily Potter's sacrifice had woven something extraordinary into the physical fabric of Number 4, not just a protection against Voldemort specifically but a complex blood ward that had, over 10 years, become something almost alive, a residue of love made architectural. He could feel it when he walked through the rooms. He couldn't undo it and wouldn't have if he could. He wrote Narcissa, the wards are remarkable. Mother must have been extraordinary. She wrote back, she was. I'll tell you more when you're here. He wrote Hermione, who was somewhere in the south of France with her parents and was, based on the thickness of her letters, reading 3 books simultaneously and generating questions faster than the postal system could move them. He wrote Draco, who was at the manor and wrote back with the specific mixture of social updates and strategic intelligence that was their correspondence, telling him about Lucius's meetings and the ministry shifts in political weather and what the senior Slytherins were saying about the previous year's events at Hogwarts, which had spread through the wizarding world in the particular garbled way that school events became legend. The version that had reached the outside was, Harry Potter had defeated Voldemort again. Harry Potter had walked into a death trap and come out whole. Harry Potter was, again, the boy who lived. This was both true and so incomplete it was functionally false, and Harry found it less annoying than he might have because he'd expected it. The wizarding world needed a narrative. Dumbledore's version of events, which had been carefully managed from the hospital wing conversation onward, framed Harry as brave and capable and undeniably powerful, but also very much a child who had acted on instinct rather than design. Which served Dumbledore's purposes and didn't particularly hurt Harry's, so he left it alone. Draco's letter on the subject had been characteristically sharp: "They're calling you the boy who lived again. You should let me write a correction to the prophet. I know someone on the editorial staff." Harry wrote back, "Leave it. The narrative they have is less dangerous than the real one. Draco, the real one is that you talked Voldemort out of the stone and then overrode him with old magic that shouldn't work in a school corridor." Harry, exactly. Leave it. There had been a pause of 2 days in the correspondence, which was Draco processing. Then, "Fine. But I want it on record that I think you're wrong about this." Harry, noted. He was at the manor by July 3rd. The second year began with Dobby. The house elf appeared in Harry's room at the manor on the morning of August 15th with the conviction of someone on a very important mission, and Harry looked up from advanced arithmetic theory and regarded him with the specific combination of patience and attention he gave to things that had arrived uninvited but with clear purpose. Dobby was vibrating. Not with magic, with emotion, which was effectively the same thing in a creature whose emotional state and magical state were directly connected. His enormous eyes were full of something that was trying to be stern and was mostly terrified. "Harry Potter," Dobby said. "Hello," Harry said. "Harry Potter must not return to Hogwarts." The elf's voice had the formal quality of a prepared statement. "There is a plot, Harry Potter. A terrible plot. If Harry Potter returns to school, Harry Potter will be in great danger." Harry set his book down. He gave Dobby his full attention, which the elf seemed to find simultaneously validating and destabilizing. "What plot?" Harry said. "Dobby cannot say," Dobby said, with the expression of someone who has constructed a position and is about to realize it isn't very strong. "Can you tell me who it involves?" Dobby cannot. "Can you tell me what kind of danger?" Dobby cannot say that either, Dobby said, miserable. "But you know," Harry said. Dobby's ears flattened. "Dobby knows. And you came to warn me because you think I'll listen." "Harry Potter has a reputation," Dobby said, with the precise enunciation of someone repeating something they've internalized carefully. "Even among house elves who serve great houses, Harry Potter is, there are things said, in the places house elves hear things. About what Harry Potter is." The enormous eyes were doing something complicated. Dobby thought if Harry Potter knew, Harry Potter would be safe. "By staying away from Hogwarts," Harry said. "Yes. Which isn't going to happen," Harry said. Dobby's face moved through several stages. "Harry Potter must, Dobby," Harry said, gently and directly. "I'm going to go to Hogwarts regardless of what the plot is, because whatever is coming is going to happen whether I'm there or not, and if I'm not there it happens to people who can't handle it the way I can." He paused. "What you can do, if you want to help, is tell me something useful. Even obliquely. Even in a way that technically doesn't break your restrictions." Dobby looked at him for a long moment. The enormous eyes were thinking, the way house elf eyes thought, all the way through, without guile, just the direct process of someone who wanted a good outcome and was trying to find the path to it. "The chamber," Dobby said finally. "Harry Potter should think about the chamber." Then he vanished. Harry picked up his book. He thought about the chamber. He wrote Hermione that afternoon, research question. Hogwarts. Anything historically documented about a chamber, a construction project by one of the founders, something hidden. Specifically Slytherin, his symbol was a serpent, which is relevant for reasons I'll explain when we're back. Her response came in under 6 hours despite the French postal delay, which told him she'd been researching Hogwarts history anyway and already had notes. Salazar Slytherin. Legend of the Chamber of Secrets, supposed to contain a monster capable of purging the school of Muggleborns. Dismissed as myth in most sources, but 3 serious historical texts treat it as architectural fact. One mentions Parseltongue as the key. "Harry, can you speak to snakes?" He wrote back, "Yes. Since I was about 5. Get me everything you have on the chamber's structural location theories." She sent 12 pages. The second year started normally and then didn't. The first sign was the cat. Mrs. Norris, Filch's particular gray shadow of a cat, was found petrified on the second floor in late October, stiff, eyes white and staring, the specific horror of something that had been turned to stone while still alive. Filch had found her, and his reaction had been a devastation that cut under the professional sourness of him and found something genuinely wrecked. Harry had been nearby and had watched and had felt, moving through the corridor's air, something that was not quite a scent and not quite a sound but was the residue of powerful magic, old, specific, terrible, with a signature he didn't recognize but whose nature he could read clearly. Basilisk. He'd read about them. Had read about them specifically after Hermione's research on the chamber, had cross-referenced Slytherin's known magical preferences and the serpent iconography and arrived at the most probable answer a month before the evidence made it unmistakable. A basilisk. 50 feet of magical serpent, sovereign in its own right over a different kingdom, capable of killing with a look or petrifying through reflection, moving through the castle's pipe system, which dated to the original construction, which meant Slytherin had built it in, commanded by Parseltongue. Commanded by Parseltongue. He stood in the second-floor corridor while Filch wept over his cat and felt the deep system of pipes in the walls and reached for the thread of serpent awareness that lived in the part of his mind where Parseltongue came from, and found it, large and ancient and moving slowly far below, and around it a second presence, something directing it that was not a living person but was something that had once been. He filed all of this and said nothing publicly and went to find Hermione. She was already in the library. Basilisk, they said at the same time. She had a notebook open with diagrams. Moving through the plumbing. The school is at least partially immune to it because almost nobody is looking directly, windows, water reflections, the cat must have seen it in the water on the floor. The petrification rather than death suggests indirect sighting. She paused. If someone sees it directly, they die, Harry said. Yes. So we need to close the chamber before it, we need to find the chamber first, Harry said. And we need to find who's opening it. He sat across from her. It's being directed. Basilisks are intelligent but not autonomous in this context, something is telling it to move, when to surface, who to target. A Parselmouth, Hermione said. Or something controlling a Parselmouth, Harry said. Or something that acts as a proxy for Slytherin's original intent. He thought about Dobby's warning. A plot. Someone is using the chamber as a weapon. That means they have access to Slytherin's original method of control, and they're using it deliberately. This isn't the basilisk acting alone. Then who? She said. He thought about the chamber, and Slytherin, and a terrible plot, and Dobby's enormous desperate eyes, and the specific phrasing Dobby had used, a great house, something Dobby had been bound to before his warning, something with enough reach to orchestrate events at Hogwarts without being present. He thought about Lucius Malfoy, and a diary, and things that could be slipped into a first year's belongings. I need to talk to Draco, he said. The conversation with Draco happened that evening, in the Slytherin common room's most private corner, with a muffling charm around them that Harry set and Draco confirmed was holding. Draco listened. His face went through several things. The final thing it arrived at was the expression Harry had come to recognize as Draco receiving information that required him to revise something about his father, which he hated and did anyway because he was, when it mattered, honest about what he was looking at. He had a diary, Harry said. Slytherin's. Or something connected to Slytherin, a preserved fragment of his intent or his instructions, old magic, the kind that could operate independently. He paused. I think it ended up at school. Inside something that a student is now being manipulated through. Draco was very still. A Horcrux, he said quietly. Harry looked at him. Father has objects, Draco said. Things he doesn't let anyone touch. He has a room in the East Wing that only he enters. The controlled expression doing something more difficult. I've known for years that some of what he keeps is dark in the specific way, not just dangerous, but aligned. Pledged. He met Harry's eyes. I don't know it was a diary. I don't know it was Slytherin. But I know he had something he was asked to hold, and I know he disposed of something before second year started, and I know he was very careful about when and how. Ginny Weasley, Harry said. First year, Ron's sister. She was given something at the start of term, Madame Malkin's, in the chaos of the shopping rush. Someone slipped something into her cauldron. Draco closed his eyes briefly. The diary is writing back to her. Yes. And gradually it's taking, yes, Harry said. The silence between them had the weight of two people who had grown up in the same orbit of dark magic and its political uses and were looking at the specific point where those uses became something that neither of them could call anything but monstrous, regardless of the family that had produced it. She's a first year, Draco said. His voice was flat. She's 11. Yes, Harry said. Draco looked at the fire. His jaw was tight. What do you need? Harry had been thinking about this since the library. The diary, he said. It's what's controlling her, and it has Slytherin's, Voldemort's, magical imprint, which means it has a connection to the basilisk, the same connection I have as a Parselmouth but older and more direct. If I can get the diary, I can close the chamber from the outside. Get the diary, Draco repeated. From Ginny Weasley, who doesn't know she has it. She knows she has a diary, Harry said. She doesn't know what it is. And you're going to go to a Gryffindor first year and ask for it. I'm going to ask her older brother, Harry said. Ron. And I'm going to be honest with him because trying to work around him will take longer than we have and he deserves the truth about what's happening to his sister. Draco was quiet for a moment. You trust him. I think he'll do anything for her, Harry said. That's enough. Ron Weasley's response to Harry approaching him was a mixture of wariness and the specific kind of pride that looked like hostility but was actually just the armor of someone who'd spent his life being sized up and found lacking by people in nicer robes. He heard Harry out in the empty Transfiguration classroom Harry had asked him to meet in, standing with his arms slightly away from his sides in the manner of someone who hadn't decided yet whether they were in a conversation or a confrontation. Harry told him what was happening to Ginny. Not the version that would frighten him into uselessness but the complete version, what the diary was, what it was doing, what the basilisk was, that it wasn't Ginny's fault, that she could be helped, and that Harry needed something specific from him. Ron went pale. Then he went red. Then he swallowed several times and said, "How long has she had it?" "Since September," Harry said. Ron said something under his breath that was probably not appropriate for school. Then, what do you need? Tell her the diary is dangerous, Harry said. Don't tell her why yet, she'll resist because she's attached to it. The imprint will have worked on her emotionally over months, she'll feel protective of it. Just tell her you need to keep it safe for her. She'll give it to you before she'll give it to anyone else. And then what? Give it to me, Harry said. I'll handle the rest. Ron looked at him with the particular blue-gray directness of a Weasley making up his mind. If something happens to her, it won't, Harry said. Not if we move now. Why do you care? Ron said. She's nothing to do with you. Harry looked at him. She's 11, he said. And someone is using her because she was easy to use. That's enough. Something shifted in Ron's expression. He was still wary. He was also, Harry could tell, a person who understood instinctively the logic of that answer, who responded to it the way people respond to things that match a fundamental truth they carry. He nodded, once, short and tight. Ginny's diary was in Harry's possession by that evening. He held it in the Slytherin common room, everyone else at dinner. Draco had stayed back on the basis of a claimed headache, and sat across from Harry with the specific stillness of someone choosing to be present for something they found uncomfortable because leaving would be worse. The diary was an ordinary-looking thing. Small, black-covered, the pages slightly yellowed. The name on the front was T.M. Riddle. Harry looked at it and felt the Horcrux, because that was what it was. He'd known it since Draco had named it, the specific fractured wrongness of a soul fragment in a vessel, a piece of Voldemort's self from 50 years earlier, sealed in this object with all the ambition and contempt and terrible brilliance of what Tom Riddle had been at 16. He could feel it looking back at him. He opened it. The pages were blank. They would respond to writing, he knew. That was the trap, the lure, the way it had drawn Ginny in. But he wasn't going to write in it. He was going to speak to it. "I know what you are," he said, in Parseltongue. The response was not text on a page. It was a sensation, something pulling toward him through the pages, a snapping attention, ancient and sharp, the Horcrux recognizing the Parseltongue and orienting toward it with the urgency of a thing that has been waiting a long time for someone capable of speaking to it properly. Then, in Parseltongue, from somewhere that wasn't quite the diary but was the thing inside it, "Who are you?" "You already know," Harry said. A pause that was not a pause exactly but the quality of something reprocessing information it had received before and is now re-evaluating. "The Potter boy," it said. "I felt your presence this year. You are not what I expected." "No," Harry said. "You carry the seal," it said. With something that was not reverence exactly but was the specific recognition of something that had studied power long enough to know what it was looking at. "You carry it genuinely. Not an imitation." "Yes. Then you know what I am." "A fragment of the greatest, a fragment," Harry said. "That's the relevant word." The silence in the Parseltongue exchange had the quality of something very intelligent encountering a framing it didn't like. "I am more than the boy who holds the seal, Tom," Harry said. The name worked the way names work in old magic, not as an insult, not as a diminishment, but as a fixing, a pinning of identity to itself rather than to the mythology it had built around itself. The Horcrux shuddered. Not physically, but through the magical bond between them, Harry felt the shudder. "Don't," it said. "That's who you are," Harry said. Tom Riddle, who was brilliant and frightened and chose power over everything because he was afraid of what he was. "You know it's true, you're a fragment of him from before he convinced himself otherwise. You remember being afraid." The silence was very long. "What do you want?" it said finally. "To close the chamber," Harry said. "To get the basilisk out of the pipes without killing it. She's innocent of whatever you planned, she's just a very old creature following the orders bred into her." He paused. "And to destroy you." "You can't destroy I can," Harry said. "You know I can." A fragment responds to the seal's authority the same way the full version would, the hierarchy is the same regardless of how whole the piece is. He paused. "I'm not trying to be cruel about this. You're a piece of a person who made terrible choices, and the piece being destroyed doesn't change what those choices were. But you're hurting a child and you need to stop." A very long silence. The Horcrux's presence in the diary was doing something complicated. The fragment of Tom Riddle at 16 was intelligent enough to run threat assessments and was coming up with answers it didn't like. It was also, Harry suspected, old enough and isolated enough in this object to have run out of the pure burning certainty that the older Voldemort maintained. A fragment left alone for 50 years in a diary, moved through Death Eater hands and storage rooms, it had had a long time to sit with itself. "You'll destroy me anyway," it said. "Why tell me?" "Because you were human once," Harry said. "Before all the rest of it." He paused. "That means something." Another long silence. Something shifted in the quality of the Horcrux's presence, not capitulation, nothing so simple. But something that was tired, if a fragment of a soul could be tired. The chamber, it said, opens from the third-floor girls' bathroom. The entrance is on the second floor, the pipes run through Moaning Myrtle's bathroom, there's a sink with a serpent mark on the tap. A pause. Tell the basilisk her name first. In Parseltongue. Her name is Ethon. She responds to her name. Harry absorbed this. Thank you, he said. Don't thank me, it said. Just, make it quick. He picked up the basilisk fong he'd sourced from Kettleburn's supply room 2 days earlier, when he'd started preparing for this, and drove it through the diary. The sound was not loud. The effect was enormous, a black pour of something that was magic and memory and the residue of a person who had existed dissolving into the air with the specific weight of something genuinely lost, not destroyed, but ended, the way things that were never supposed to exist in that form end when they find their resolution. The fong went through the pages and the pages blackened and curled and the presence in the diary said nothing at all and then was simply absent. Draco hadn't moved from his chair. Done, he said. Done, Harry said. Are you? Draco stopped. Harry looked at him. His face was doing the difficult thing it did when it was deciding whether to say something real. Are you all right? Harry thought about Tom Riddle at 16. He thought about a brilliant terrified boy who had turned the fear into architecture, who had built a monster out of ambition because being afraid was intolerable to him. He thought about what he might have been if Narcissa hadn't found him in an alley on a summer day and kissed his scar and opened a door that led to tutors and libraries and a room in a manor and people who chose him back. Yes, he said. He didn't elaborate. Draco didn't push. This was one of the things about Draco. They went to Myrtle's bathroom that night, Harry and Hermione and Draco, because when Harry had told Hermione the plan that afternoon she'd said, "I'm coming," in the tone that indicated this was not a point of negotiation, and when Draco had heard them discussing it he'd said, "Obviously I'm coming," in the tone that indicated he'd been assuming this for some time. The entrance was exactly where the diary had described, the sink with the small serpent engraving, the tap that wouldn't turn in the ordinary way. Harry crouched, looked at the serpent, said its name in Parseltongue, and felt the tap rotate and the sink descend and the pipe open. Hermione looked at the pipe. That's very narrow. It widens, Harry said. He'd gone through the diary's description of the layout carefully. About 30 feet down it opens into a proper passage. We're going down a pipe, Draco said flatly. Yes, Harry said. Into a chamber built by Salazar Slytherin. Yes. A pause. Right then, Draco said, and went first, because he was not going to let Harry think he was the kind of person who hesitated about pipes. The chamber was extraordinary and terrible and old in the way that places preserved outside of ordinary time are old. The air had the quality of something untouched for centuries, the stone faces of serpents carved into every surface, the long central nave lit by some sourceless green luminescence. At the far end, a statue of Slytherin himself, mouth open, the entrance to the basilisk's den. And in the pipes above and around them, massive, slow, the movement of something enormous. Harry stepped to the center of the chamber and said, in Parseltongue, Ethon. A silence. Then, from the pipes, who calls me by name? Someone who comes in sovereignty and not in command, Harry said. Someone who asks, not orders. A pause that was very long, the pause of something ancient considering something new. No one has asked, the basilisk said. The voice in Parseltongue was deep and textured, a voice that moved like stone moving, unhurried. In 50 years. No one has come here who could speak, and those who could speak came in orders. I know, Harry said. I'm here to offer you something different. What? Your name, Harry said. And a choice. The basilisk descended from the pipes into the chamber with the specific slowness of something that is not afraid and therefore moves at the pace it chooses. She was enormous, more than enormous, the scale of her redefining the chamber's proportions as she coiled at its far end, the great triangular head turning, the closed eyes a mercy Harry was deeply grateful for. He kept his own eyes on the floor, not from fear but from respect. "I don't want to hurt you," he said. "You've been used. What Riddle used you for was not your choice. The students above, it was not their fault and it was not yours." A long silence from the basilisk. "I am a weapon," she said, with the flatness of something stating a fact about itself. "That is what I am." "No," Harry said. "You are a sovereign creature who was bred and placed and used as a weapon. Those are not the same thing." He paused. "I am not here to unmake you. I'm here to give you back yourself." He felt Hermione behind him being very still and Draco beside her being very still and the chamber around all of them holding its enormous breath. "What do you want?" Ethan said. "The students to be safe," Harry said. "The chamber to be unsealed, not destroyed, but accessible, part of the school again rather than hidden. And for you to be Ethan, rather than the monster." A silence that lasted a full minute. "And if I choose not?" the basilisk said. "Then I'll find another way to keep the students safe," Harry said honestly. "But I'd rather have a conversation than a conflict." Another silence. Then Ethan said, "My eyes. If I open them in this chamber, your companions will die." "I know," Harry said. "You would not," she said. "Your eyes, you are something I cannot kill by sight. I felt it when you entered." A pause that had something thoughtful in it. "I have not met one like you." "No," Harry said. "You haven't." "I will not open my eyes in this chamber," Ethan said. "Not today. Not while the small ones are here." It was a statement, Harry thought, not an offer, the basilisk making a choice because she had been given one, and finding that it felt different from orders. "What you ask of the chamber, the unsealing, that requires more than your words. It requires the one who closed it." "Slytherin is dead," Harry said. "Yes," Ethan said. "But what he sealed can be unsealed by one who holds the same authority he held." The great head turned, closed eyes toward Harry. "Which is you? If you are what you say you are." Harry stood in the center of the Chamber of Secrets, in the greenlit silence, with the basilisk's enormous presence at one end and the carved faces of serpents on every wall, and felt the seal in his forehead warm like a brand, and put his hand flat on the nearest wall and said, in Parseltongue and in the deep register that wasn't language but was the thing beneath language, the statement of what he was, "Open." The walls moved. Not violently, gradually, the stone shifting with the slow certainty of something that had been waiting for the right instruction, the serpent carvings unwinding from around the exits, the sealed passages opening to reconnect with the castle above. Light came in from the reconnected shafts, ordinary castle light, torch and lantern, and the chamber breathed differently, became part of the building above it rather than separate from it, a hidden room made into a room. Dumbledore would find it in a week. Harry was counting on that. He wrote Flamel that evening, the letter Narcissa had helped him compose over the summer, the one explaining what he was and what had happened with the stone and what he believed about the nature of the fragments and the question of what came next. He'd been holding the letter for months, waiting for the right moment. Ginny Weasley spent 2 days in the hospital wing and came out without memory of the diary's influence, which was the clean resolution Hermione had predicted once the fragment was destroyed. Ron hovered outside the hospital wing for both days and slept in the corridor the second night, which Harry thought said everything necessary about the Weasley sibling bond. On the second day, Harry stopped by the hospital wing with a book and a small bag of things Narcissa had taught him were appropriate for someone recovering from magical influence, things that tasted of something real and ordinary, a grounding practice from the old texts on identity magic. He left them with the nurse for Ginny without announcement. Hermione, walking with him afterward, said, "You didn't have to do that." "I know," Harry said. "She doesn't know you did it." "That's fine." Hermione was quiet for a moment. Then, "You do this a lot. The things that don't need doing but should be done anyway." "Do I?" "The bread rolls with Draco." The way you checked on Quirrell's pulse before you left the chamber last year. The thing with Ron, being honest with him when it would have been easier not to be. She paused. You're much kinder than you let people think. I let the people I trust think it, Harry said. She was quiet again. How many people is that? He thought about it genuinely, not as a performance of consideration but as an actual count. About 5, he said. 5, she said. It's a good number, he said. She made the sound she made when she found something simultaneously exasperating and accurate. Fine, she said. 5. He smiled, the rare one, brief. Sirius Black came on a Thursday in June. Not in the way the Prophet would later report it, not the escaped convict, not the dramatic chase, not the spectacle of it. He came first as a pulse, a disturbance in the Black family magic that Harry felt 3 days before the escape itself, a vibration in the very specific frequency of ancient blood magic that Narcissa had taught him to recognize. He wrote her immediately, something is moving in the Black magic. Coming this way. Someone who carries the family line. She wrote back in 4 hours, faster than the owl should have been able to manage, which meant she'd been watching, I know. Sirius. He's coming for you. The Black magic is calling him. Harry, let him come. She added at the bottom, he didn't do what they said he did. I have always believed this. The magic would not call him to you if he had. Sirius Black escaped Azkaban on a Tuesday night and arrived at the edge of Hogwarts grounds by Thursday, which was faster than the Ministry thought possible and made perfect sense to Harry when he understood that the man had been burning towards something for 12 years and finally had a direction. Harry felt him at the ground's edge on Thursday evening during dinner, like a vibration in the wards, something the Black magic recognized, the same frequency as what he'd felt in himself since Narcissa's kiss, older and exhausted and burning underneath the exhaustion. He excused himself from the table, which earned a look from Draco that he met calmly, and walked through the castle and out onto the grounds alone. The Dementors were stationed at the perimeter. Dumbledore had allowed them at the gates as a Ministry condition, a decision Harry found questionable and had said so in his second-year meeting with the headmaster. They affected him differently than other students, not happiness they drew from him, not warmth, but something else, an awareness of what they were, creatures whose nature related to his own, and while their presence was deeply unpleasant it was not the incapacitating despair it was for others. He moved past them with the particular quality of his presence and they parted the way they always did, the way all dark creatures did, not from fear, but from recognition. Sirius was at the Treeline. He was thinner than photographs suggested. The photographs from 12 years ago showed a young man of considerable physical confidence, the kind of person who moved through space like he owned it. What Harry found at the Treeline was a man who was still that person somewhere inside, but wearing it on a frame that had been eroded, worn down to essentials, the charm and the lightness stripped back to something harder and more real. His eyes were sunken but the sharpness in them had not gone. He looked at Harry and went very still. Harry stopped 10 feet from him. The Black magic was doing something between them, the same thing it had done in Diagon Alley the day Narcissa had kissed his scar, but different in character, recognition between family rather than recognition of worth. Old magic knowing its own. Harry, Sirius said. His voice was rough, worn down like the rest of him. Sirius, Harry said. The name landed between them with the particular weight of things that have been carried for a long time before being set down. Sirius's jaw worked. You look like James. The hair, exactly. And the eyes are lilies. I knew what you'd look like, I've had the photographs, but, he stopped himself. The raw thing he was keeping controlled was doing it with difficulty. 12 years, he said. I know, Harry said. Come inside. The Dementors won't touch you, Harry said. I'll walk you in. Sirius looked at him with the specific expression of a man recalibrating his entire model of a situation. Narcissa's letters, he said. She wrote to me. Inside. How He shook his head. She said you were extraordinary. I thought she was just being Narcissa. She generally means exactly what she says, Harry said. She does, Sirius agreed, something wry trying to surface through the exhaustion. She always did. Even as a child she was. He stopped again. You know her well. She's family, Harry said. Simply, without the need to qualify it. Something in Sirius's face moved in a way that was hard to watch and important not to look away from. The grief of 12 years alongside the recognition that the child had been found and had found something, not what was lost, not the family that should have been, but something, and that this was both not enough and more than he'd dared. Okay, Sirius said. His voice wasn't quite steady. Okay. Walk me in then. They walked through the Dementor line side by side and the Dementors moved back from both of them, the way they did from Harry but deeper now, affected by the resonance of what walked between them, the black family magic and the seal and something else, the specific quality of two people whose connection ran through the oldest and most legitimate channels of the wizarding world's dark tradition, real family, actual bond. Not the fiction of convenience or the performance of loyalty but the real structural thing. Dumbledore was waiting at the castle doors. Of course he was. He'd known, probably felt the grounds wards respond, probably watched from the window, probably had spent the walk time determining what position to take. He looked at Sirius with an expression of complicated relief. He looked at Harry beside Sirius with an expression that was also complicated but differently. Sirius, he said. Come inside. I'd like to finish a conversation first, Sirius said, and his eyes had gone to Harry with the particular expression of someone who has been waiting 12 years to do one thing and is going to do it before anything else happens. He crouched down, the same motion Narcissa had made in the alley, the crouching to eye level, the choice to make themselves equal, and put his hands on Harry's shoulders and looked at him. I should have been there, he said. From the beginning. I should have fought for you. I went after Peter when I should have gone to you, and then I was in Azkaban and I couldn't. His voice broke on it, briefly, and came back rougher. I'm sorry. For all of it. I know a sorry doesn't stop, Harry said. Sirius stopped. You're here now, Harry said. That's enough. Sirius looked at him. His eyes were bright in a way that had nothing to do with the gauntness around them, the 12 years of Azkaban around them. He looked at Harry and Harry looked back and the black magic hummed between them with the deep patient frequency of something that had been waiting for this specific moment and found it satisfactory. Okay, Sirius said again, rougher. He stood. He looked at Dumbledore. I want to see Peter Pettigrew, he said. Before anything else. He's been hiding as Ron Weasley's rat for 12 years and I want it established properly. Dumbledore looked at Harry. Harry looked at him steadily. Scabbers, he said. Ron's rat. He's the real secret keeper, not Sirius. Sirius was a decoy. You knew, Dumbledore said. Not accusingly. Just absorbing. I suspected, Harry said. The black magic doesn't resonate toward traitors the way it would if the guilt was genuine. I needed Sirius here to confirm. Dumbledore was quiet for a moment. Then, come inside, both of you. He opened the door. We have quite a lot to discuss. The Pettigrew situation resolved in 2 days, with the controlled ugliness of something that had been festering for 12 years and came out with all the infection intact. Peter Pettigrew, cornered in Dumbledore's office by a combination of Sirius's righteous fury and Harry's considerably more controlled insistence that the truth be fully documented before anyone decided what to do with it, produced a confession that the Ministry could not ignore. The Ministry, faced with evidence of a 12-year wrongful imprisonment and a spy who had been hiding as a child's pet while remaining in contact with Voldemort's scattered supporters, had the specific response of an institution trying to manage its own embarrassment, which was slow and full of political negotiation but ultimately unavoidable. Sirius was cleared in August. Harry was at the ministry for the formal proceeding, standing beside Narcissa and a recuperated Sirius who had spent the summer at the manor eating Narcissa's food and sleeping 16 hours a day and gradually becoming, again, the person the photographs had shown. He'd lost the gauntness, was losing the hollowness. He laughed more. He had opinions about Quidditch that he expressed at length and at volume. He looked at Harry across rooms with the expression of someone still processing the fact of him, still doing the arithmetic of 12 years against the present. He had started calling him pup somewhere around week 3, without announcement or explanation, and Harry had not objected because he found, much to his own surprise, that he didn't mind it at all. On the day of the clearance hearing, Sirius came out of the courtroom with the specific expression of a man who has been carrying something for 12 years and set it down and is finding that the relief is larger and stranger than expected, not the clean thing relief is supposed to be but the messy human thing it actually is, too big for the moment, requiring processing time the moment doesn't provide. He found Harry in the corridor and put his arm around his shoulders and said nothing for a while. Harry said nothing back. They stood in the ministry corridor while Narcissa finished with the legal documentation inside and Lucius talked to someone politically useful and the building moved around them with the ordinary business of institutional magic, and the Black family bond ran between them with the old deep frequency, and it was enough. Later, on the steps of the ministry, Sirius said, "I want a petition for guardianship." Formally. "The Dursleys, already handled," Narcissa said, appearing behind them with her bag and her expression of things completed. "There's a separate legal arrangement in place. Has been for 3 years." Sirius looked at her. You just took care of it." "Someone had to," she said. "That was my job," he said. "You were indisposed," she said simply. "The job needed doing." Sirius opened his mouth and closed it and looked at Harry and said, "Is she always like this?" "Consistently," Harry said. "How do you get used to it?" Harry said. "Then you start to appreciate it." Sirius looked at Narcissa, who was already moving down the steps with the direction of someone who had her afternoon scheduled. Then he looked back at Harry. Then he made the sound of someone genuinely amused for the first time in a long time, and it was a good sound, and Harry found himself smiling the rare smile at the steps of the Ministry of Magic on a Thursday afternoon in August, with the sun coming down on London's magical heart, and thought, 5 is still a good number. But numbers can grow.